All right, everyone. Hello again, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. Your mostly weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey. I am your host, and we've got certainly a show for you today. The UFC went through with their plan of having 3 events in a 7-day period. We are now currently 8 days removed from UFC 249, and we have 2 more events to discuss this particular episode. So we'll be doing mostly that. Not a tremendous amount of news came out over the last week. The UFC announced another one of their inductees into the Hall of Fame. But really quiet on the news front for the moment. So we'll get into that, such as it is. All right, back with me for the first time basically since the pandemic broke out. 411 Mania's Jack of all trades, and I know some of you out there, Jeff Harris, is once again joining us for the show. Jeff, nice to have you back. How you been?
That crooked referee, that pencil neck geek, Keith Peterson, was Henry Cejudo's uncle. He was his uncle. That's why he called the fight for Henry Cejudo, that pencil neck geek. He couldn't look me in the eye.
Yeah, I think that would have been amusing if Cruz had gone full-blown Freddie Blassie.
That's basically what he did. Pretty close to it. He might as well just, say Keith Peterson was his uncle, because, when you're like, the man was on a bender the night before and smelled like cigarettes and alcohol, smelled like cigarettes and booze. You're pretty much a step away from that already.
To be fair, if all I did was see a picture of Keith Peterson, I'd assume that's how he smells.
And then he was like that guy got out of there as soon as the fight was over. He was nowhere to be found. Which reminds me of like the Montreal screw job and Jim Cornette talking about him and Earl Hebner getting out of Montreal as soon as they could.
Yeah. I didn't. Again, you had life intervene over the last couple of shows, so I didn't get a chance to talk with you about the fallout from UFC 249. Actually, I didn't talk with anybody about it on the show. Last week was just me. So, just, very briefly, your thoughts on the event, some of the results.
I'm not going to write off Tony Ferguson yet. You know how big of a fan I am of Tony Ferguson, right? So
I do.
I think he just made some mistakes in that fight. I don't think it was an awful performance. I think he just took too many shots from Gaethje. Gaethje was very patient. Gaethje hits like a truck, and to me, it was like a war of attrition.
Yeah, I think I said this last week. I'm not writing off Tony Ferguson at all. I think anyone who does is foolish, but
Dave Meltzer.
You do have to consider with Tony, first of all, that was a pretty hellacious beating he took, and he is 36 at this point. So I'm certainly not writing him off by any stretch of the imagination. Because if something like this happens with someone who isn't one of the top, 4
this is
lightweights
the lightweight
in the world,
division. And Gaethje is one of the top lightweights in the world. This is what happens. This is the Shark Tank, man.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. Again, I'm perfectly willing to say, Tony, take some time off, get, heal up physically before you come back for a fight, and then let's see where we go from there.
And look, second of all, I like Tony Ferguson, but he sounds like an utter idiot the way he handled that loss. He was cracked in the head. He was taking unprotected shots. That was a good stoppage. Now, yes, do we see sometimes referees show more leniency and let it go on a little bit more? Yeah, we do. Just last night, I think, for example, Dan Miragliotta was a little more lenient, but I don't think what Keith Peterson did. And look, I don't know what Peterson does in his spare time. If he's a chain smoker, if he drinks alcohol. I don't think he did a bad job in that fight, though, and I don't think he did a bad job by calling that fight. And the stuff Cruz is complaining about with telling the referee he wants to be put out, that's not part of the rules of MMA, Robert. I'm sorry.
No, it isn't. I guarantee you, every fighter in the back tells the referee before the fight, "I've got a great chin. I can take a lot of shots, so don't be quick to stop it." I guarantee you, they all say that.
Or they say, "I make sure that I'm out." If you call it, that's not how refereeing works. That's not how the rules work. Okay, and Keith Peterson, his job is not to do what the fighter tells him to do. You know, that's not his job. And Dominic Cruz just can't admit that he's a sore loser. That's all it is. And that was a good stoppage. We have seen worse stoppages and worse decisions done by referees. That was not one of those times. That was a good stoppage. And Cruz has no one to blame but himself, not Keith Peterson. Point the finger where it belongs.
Yeah, again, I said when I reviewed it, I'm not sure I'd say it's a good stoppage, but it's not the worst.
It was a good stoppage.
I'm not so sure it's good.
Why?
Because he is moving to regain position. He is moving to redefend himself. Most of those 11 unanswered shots that everyone likes to hang their hat on for this argument weren't clean. Look, again, I can live with the stop. Hang on. It's not. They glance. Most of them are not clean. Now again, I can live with the stoppage. I understand how it happened. I understand why it happened.
To me, none of those shots didn't do any damage.
I didn't say they didn't do damage. I said they were glancing blows. Those are not the same thing.
The knee to the head was not a glancing blow.
No. Hey, I'm not saying no. The knee to the head, the follow-up right that Cejudo landed, clean. 100% clean. Again, I can live with the stoppage. I just
if that was a bad stoppage, then what happened with Renan Barão and Faber was a bad stoppage.
Yeah, probably.
Which you never said before.
I don't think I had much of an opinion on it at the time.
You didn't because you hate Uriah Faber.
I think the issue with the Faber one, it's more that he's not actually moving.
Like Faber, you like Cruz and you hate Faber.
Both accurate. Hang on, both accurate statements.
You're biased toward Cruz. Cruz is one of your favorites.
Hold on. There's a fundamental difference. I think if you look at Faber in that circumstance, he's not actually moving anything. He's just holding onto that leg and getting hit. And that, to me, the Faber stoppage was more akin to what happened with Harris and Overeem. Overeem's not doing tremendous damage with any of those punches, but Harris is completely physically incapacitated by the position.
There were spots last night where Morigliata easily could have stopped that fight and given it to Harris.
Yeah.
And that flurry.
And
he let it go.
And the real, I think in all honesty,
but he let it go for both. He let it go for both guys. I don't know if that was the right thing, but we don't always see consistency among refereeing.
No, which sucks. And unfortunately is completely unavoidable.
But Dominic Cruz talking about instructing a referee to make sure he's completely knocked out. I'm sorry, that's asinine. That's not how the rules work.
Well, again, every fighter in their last meeting with the ref says something that's roughly akin to that, I'm sure, and it shouldn't factor into what the referee does.
That's why Dominic Cruz just needs to go full on Freddie Blassie. Just say like Keith Peterson was on the take.
Which also wouldn't be terribly shocking. Not trying to
hang on. Now you're accusing Keith Peterson of corruption.
I'm not accusing Keith Peterson of corruption. I'm saying at no point in any professional fight would I be shocked to learn a referee was paid off. That's what I'm saying. I have no evidence in this instance. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm saying if evidence comes to light that Keith Peterson was paid off for this or any other fight, I wouldn't be surprised. That's what I'm saying.
So basically, you're agreeing with Cruz that he was getting out of town because he was bribed. He was bribed to make sure Cejudo won.
I did not say that at all.
Okay.
I said I am not. Hang on. I said literally the words that came out of my mouth. I would not be surprised if that happened in this fight or any other fight. That's not about Keith Peterson. That's this fight, any ref, any organization ever. The notion that this sport is somehow not corrupt to the gills is believing that requires a pathological level of delusion about how the sport operates.
Just admit that watching Cruz come back after over 3 years and getting cracked in the head by Captain Cringe, by Triple C, by the champ really hurt your feelings.
It didn't hurt my feelings.
Okay.
I've done a really good job over the last little bit of trying to divorce myself emotionally from the sport. I do not have a healthy relationship with fandom of any kind.
We'll see.
No, I mean, in all seriousness, I do not get out of it emotionally what I put into it, so I don't.
Okay.
And yeah, look, do I find Cruz an interesting fighter? Yeah. Do I find Henry Cejudo a bloviating jackass most of the time? Yeah. So what?
So what is my point?
Again, that is my point. So what? It doesn't matter.
There you go.
It doesn't affect my consumption of the sport. It doesn't affect anything.
You can't say that on one hand and say it doesn't affect your consumption at all.
I watched the damn fight, didn't I? I watched the last 2 events, didn't I? How does that affect anything about my choice to consume the sport? I consume the sport or I don't, right? It's a binary equation.
I think it's clearly affected.
Your inability to discern my words is what's annoying me.
I think it's clearly affected how you view things.
View what?
It's clearly affected your viewpoints on things.
On what? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, I think deep down, you're unhappy that Cruz lost that way and that maybe Peterson called the fight too quickly.
No, it doesn't actually affect anything for me.
Okay. All right, if that's what you say, that's your opinion.
Nothing about how I conduct myself changes. There is no functional difference.
Okay. Sure.
Look, I've had this argument with people about Conor because there's a bunch of idiots out there who say the sport's better with Conor.
Well,
I don't think it is. Moreover, or the other one that got thrown around was if Conor's really gone, you'll miss him. No, I won't. My enjoyment of the sport and my consumption of the sport have nothing to do with Conor. I watch just as much MMA.
The media clearly misses Conor, and Dana White misses Conor.
Well, sure. They have a vested financial stake in it.
Yes.
I watched just as much MMA before Conor got to the UFC as I do when he's in the UFC, as I will when he's out of the UFC. He doesn't matter. Who the champion is doesn't matter. If we're talking about me and my relationship to how much of the sport I consume.
Okay.
In fact, there is now that I think about it, there is no actual outcome that matters.
In relation to your consumption of the sport?
At the moment.
Okay, sure.
I mean, look, somebody dies in the cage, maybe I'll have a giant crisis of conscience, but until then.
Okay. Well, I hope that doesn't happen.
Well, look, someone dying in the UFC is a functional inevitability.
I mean,
you can never reduce the chance to 0. And the probability of anything happening, as long as it is greater than 0, repeated with over enough iterations, will eventually happen.
Right.
Someone's going to die in the UFC.
It's a morbid subject, Robert.
I'm a fairly morbid person.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, anything else from 249?
I think Tony Ferguson can bounce back.
I imagine he will.
Does he ever get back to that title level? Which let's be honest, the fact that he never got to fight for the actual title is an absolute joke.
Complete travesty, 100%.
But even the fact that he's 36 isn't necessarily the death knell of his career. So I'm not going to write him off just yet.
No, not death knell, but
he's suffered defeats before, and he's been able to bounce back. and he
suffered one defeat in the UFC prior to this.
Yeah, so I mean, plus Gagey is a tough opponent for anybody. So
hey, Gagey might beat Khabib. I don't think that's what'll happen, but he might. I wouldn't be shocked if he did.
I am not picking Gagey against Khabib.
Again, neither am I, but my jaw's not going to drop if he beats him.
Right. But that's all I have.
You don't want to talk about Francis Ngannou making use of the Todd Duffy punches to win a fight?
I mean, it was entertaining for all the 20 seconds. I mean, it wasn't much of a fight though, you know?
Yeah. Nothing is that's that short.
I don't know what's going on with the heavyweight situation. I am not in favor of stripping Stipe of the belt. Now people are talking about John Jones versus Ngannou. I doubt that happens. But whatever.
All right. So
I would just say Ngannou should wait, see what happens for now.
Assuming he's in a position to financially afford that, yeah. I completely agree with that. All right, let's move on to Wednesday then for UFC on ESPN plus 29. Let's see. Main event. Oh, God. Glover Teixeira defeats Anthony Smith via TKO, punches, 104 of the fifth round. Odd fight. Well, I shouldn't say odd. Smith came out, first round, looked great. Fought really long, kept catching Glover on the end of his punches, moved well, backed Teixeira up. Really, really great 5 minutes out of Anthony Smith. Unfortunately, it looks like he fought at a pace he couldn't sustain. I'm going to look this up because I'm curious about that event now. In the first round of that fight, let's have a look here. Let's see if this website will load. And we're talking about Anthony Smith. Yeah, he threw 82 strikes. He threw 92 in the second. I actually gave him the second round, which was which was much closer. I know all the official judges gave that to Teixeira. He kept a fairly high pace, right about 100 punches a round for a guy that size, and this goes for anyone at 205 or above. That's not really sustainable. And then in the third, Glover cracks him with an uppercut, drops him with a left hook, looks for the finish, can't quite find it. Smith survives, go into the fourth, more of the same, pretty much the same uppercut combination. He baits Smith into covering up and ducking, uppercut through the guard, gets on top, pounds on him. Smith actually loses some teeth I think it's at this point.
Poor guy.
Yeah. Goes back to his corner, comes out for the fifth round. Teixeira takes him down very, very easily. Finally the ref stops it.
Had to fight off a home invader last month and then gets his teeth knocked out this month by Teixeira.
Yeah. I think the final injury tally for Smith after this fight was broken nose, broken orbital, pretty bad cut under the right eye, and then lost one tooth, one of the front teeth, and then one of the back teeth.
Ugh. I hope the UFC pays for his dental.
Usually, if it's injuries incurred in a case during the course of a fight, the state will pay for it. That's one of the things the State Athletic Commission does. They reimburse.
Good.
That's one of the reasons fighters used to always. One of the things when the UFC started helping provide insurance for fighters, we saw a lot more guys fall out of fights beforehand.
Right.
Most fighters would go into a fight with a serious injury, conceal it after the fight, claim it happened during the fight, and then because they couldn't afford their own insurance.
Do they still provide that out of competition insurance, you think? Or
I believe so.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything about them stopping.
But
oh yeah, fighting is an absurdly dangerous profession. If you're in the insurance business, yeah, you You don't get.
But I think it was good for them to start doing that. I mean, if anything. But that was back in 2011, I want to say.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, this fight, oh, God. All right.
So I guess the debate around this fight, was it stopped too late?
Unequivocally, yes, in my opinion. I think empirically.
Chael Sonnen rarely, gets angry and, takes a stand on these things, and he lost it over this fight. You rarely see him just, lose it.
I heard some of the audio from that, yeah. I mean,
not
everyone...
not that Chael is this consummate elder statesman, but you don't often hear him just go crazy like that.
Well, Michael Bisping was fairly emotional when talking about it on the post-fight show. Daniel Cormier was pretty incensed in real time. Was it Cormier? Yeah, I think it was Cormier and Felder that were the trio for that, and then.
Well,
Cormier was there.
It's any fighter is going to want to continue until they're in the grave, basically. No fighter is going to. So then it's on the referee in the corner. I don't know. I feel the referee was responsible, and I guess the corner is responsible too, but is a corner really going to be aware of how hurt their fighter is? Or are they going to have their blinders on, because they're there to support their client?
It's a hard question, and it's especially a difficult question as it pertains to MMA, because MMA still is steeped in a culture that thinks of that in a negative light.
Right.
One of the things
I remember one fight with Overeem, and I think it was Rogerio Nogueira and Pride, where Rogerio started just this one flurry up, and his corner just threw in the towel quickly. They weren't going to let him get beat up anymore. And I thought that was interesting. And this was 14 years ago, I want to say. Maybe 15. It was Rogerio Nogueira versus Overeem back in Pride.
Yeah, they fought a couple of times. So, yeah, and again, I think part of that is, and this is just a reality about MMA, I think, at the moment. I've heard a few people say this, so I'm going to echo it because I think it's correct. I don't think we're going to see a major culture shift about the mentality about throwing in the towel until something catastrophic happens in the cage.
Right.
I mean, one of the reasons you see it so often in boxing is I think boxing is much more made peace with the fact that this is a potentially fatal activity and we have to be cognizant of that.
Right.
I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a high-level boxing trainer right now with any number of years in the game who hasn't had a fighter die on them at some point.
Mm.
So they're all very cognizant of it.
So this was Pride Critical Countdown in 2006, and it was a corner stoppage against Nogueira in the early in the second round. The referee didn't stop, but the corner threw in the towel as soon as Rogerio just started wailing on Overeem. And I thought that was a bit it didn't look like enough to get a stoppage, to warrant a stoppage, but the corner wanted him out of there for some reason. Now, I have no idea if Overeem was going into that fight with a serious injury, and his corner just was worried that if he took too much more punishment, it would have been bad for him. I have no idea. But I just always thought that was interesting.
Well, I mean, Chuck's corner threw in the towel against Rampage when they fought in Pride. And while Chuck was getting just kind of wrecked at that, he was in unbelievably bad positions, but he wasn't getting bombed on yet.
And what was the situation with the BJ Penn GSP rematch? Was it did they throw in the towel or?
Yeah. Penn's corner stopped it between rounds 4 and 5.
And that was a good decision.
Yeah, and again, was BJ Penn getting physically destroyed? Was he getting again, was he getting stopped? He was at no point really in danger.
Beat up.
Yeah,
he was getting beat up.
He was getting beat up, and while he wasn't in danger of being stopped, he wasn't going to turn it around. There was no point in letting him go out for another round of punishment.
And BJ Penn was still a top star at the time, still one of the best fighters in the world.
Yeah,
like after that fight, he had a later that year.
He still had a couple of lightweight title defenses.
Yeah, he had a stunning performance that year against Kenny Florian. Like amazing.
Yeah, that was Florian, and then I think he went Florian and then Diego Sanchez.
Yep.
Before he ran into Frankie. It's just a thing that I don't think the culture of MMA that's at all levels is really gonna take a good hard look at this, at how we approach this until something tragic happens. And
well, we talk about it a lot when there is a fight that doesn't get stopped quickly enough. We talk about it and we get angry, and then we just kind of move on.
Well, case in point, if we're looking at this one, I think Teixeira's head corner for this was Mark Montoya, who's a very good coach by and large. He's got several fighters in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever listened to some of the interviews he's done, he's a knowledgeable guy. Operates a very successful camp and gym. This is about the third time or so he's sent a fighter out for a final round that was utterly unnecessary and ultimately detrimental to their physical well-being.
Fighters believe, if I can still answer the round, I can still go out there and win. And maybe the corner is just stuck in that mindset too. I think there needs to be a separation. And I don't know, but does the referee have a responsibility here? Who is more responsible in this outcome?
I think more responsible the referee.
Okay. Look, I have problems with the referees, not dealing. First of all, not dealing with timidity. Issuing warnings multiple warnings without ever taking away points. If they're repeatedly getting warned, and then you should start taking points away. So an inconsistent application of the rules, and be like, hey, keep an eye on your fighter. I don't really think you should continue, but whatever.
Yeah. And to Herzog's credit, and I've had issue with a couple of other of hers, not a lot, just a couple of other times Herzog has been the official. Vast majority of the time, he's a very good referee. He came out after the fight and said, the ultimate responsibility is mine. I'm going to take this and learn from it going forward. Anthony Smith did what most fighters do and said, and defended his corner and the referee and everything. And again, I don't think we're going to have a real come to Jesus moment about this until somebody dies or is catastrophically injured. And somewhat lost in this discussion, and I think moving on from the non-stoppage and how bad it was. Credit to Glover Teixeira, man. Dude's 40, and just isn't going away. They've given him a bunch of the young up-and-comers in that division. Carl Robertson, Iwan Kutalava, Nikita Krylov, and Anthony Smith. And to be clear, I thought Krylov beat him. It was a split decision. But the others, he's finished.
He's on a 4-fight winning streak, and he's always been a pretty durable dude, but just sort of not able to... He's that kind of just quality opponent who's good at hanging around, but he just can't pass the finish line. Gustafsson was like that way as well.
No, Gustafsson was like that at a higher level than Teixeira. If you look at Teixeira's losses, look at Teixeira's losses versus Gustafsson's, right? Gustafsson had losses. Gustafsson lost to
Phil Davis, Anthony Johnson, Gustafsson, and Corey Anderson.
Yeah, again, the Davis and Anderson are a level below those other the other bits of opposition.
Okay.
Gustafsson lost to Davis much earlier than Teixeira did.
Gustafsson lost to Anthony Smith.
Yeah.
So I mean, your argument's kind of lost on me.
That was also a fight Gustafsson had one foot out the door on. I mean, come on. He was mostly done with the sport before he got into the cage.
Meh.
Hey, look, your level of commitment and where you are mentally as far as how you consider your career is something to be considered.
Here's my point. John Jones. He went on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-fight winning streak, fought John Jones for the title, lost by decision. Lost the decision to Phil Davis. Phil Davis was a legit top 10 fighter for most of his time in the UFC. I think you would agree.
Top 15, yeah. He was top 15 for the vast majority of it. I think he only got top 10 in intermittent spurts, but...
Come on.
Hey. Again, dude was a top 15 guy in the division before the division really started sucking.
Anthony Johnson, title contender, knockout artist, at light heavyweight, fought for the title twice.
Yep.
Gustafsson, multiple-time contender. Let's see. Corey Anderson. Well, let's just look at the rankings now.
I mean, at this point, Corey
Anderson is a top 5. Corey Anderson, a top 5 light heavyweight. Boom.
He's still top 5?
Yes.
God, that division sucks. He got knocked out cold in his last fight and is still one of the top 5. I don't know. I don't want to get onto the rankings.
Top 5. Top 5 light heavyweight.
Hey, guess what? The UFC rankings still have they still have Gustafsson ranked.
And he just beat Teixeira just beat the number 4 light heavyweight.
Yeah, again, Teixeira's a really good.
So you can't say that Teixeira isn't a high level contender. He is. He's just not able to. He's just not able to win the title. It's that simple.
You can't beat Corey Anderson, man. That's a pretty big mark against you.
I don't know. I think if they were to fight 2 more times, I think he'd have a decent chance of winning.
Look, yeah, if they fought again,
Hughes never beat Dennis Holman.
True.
Sometimes it's just matchups.
And I think one of them took that fight on short. Technically they both took that fight on short notice.
Considering he's 31-7, and so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5 losses in the octagon, and those are the guys he's lost to. That's a pretty good to me. That's an exceptional resume.
Yeah,
he was fought as many times as he had to be still fighting at 40, and still be competitive and have a winning streak in the UFC, and to beat a guy who's a lot younger than him, who recently fought for the title.
A lot bigger than him too.
You know, that's pretty. You're pretty damn good. You're better than pretty good. You're pretty damn good to still be hanging in the UFC. So
a lot of people, for some reason, I don't know why people don't talk about it more, but Glover's he's a country guy. You know, I mean, you and I both live in the United States. We've heard for a lot of time about, farm strength.
Yeah.
Glover grew up in Brazilian farm country. Like, that guy's got country hoss strength built into him,
He's a thick, strong dude. He's got good genes, for sure.
Just an old war horse that will not go away. And, credit to him for that. That's not an easy thing to do.
I don't know. I think part of what probably helped him is because he was experienced, but when he came into the UFC, he was already sort of at a more advanced age.
Yeah. He got into the UFC fairly late.
But I guess the benefit was, though, in his 20s, he wasn't fighting, he was he was fighting lesser opponents as he was making his way up. You know, he wasn't going to battle with, the killers. Is what I'm trying to not so eloquently say.
Yeah, the bulk of his early career he spent outside not only outside the UFC but outside the major promotions. So I don't know who's next. Glover called somebody out after this, and I can't remember who. But it was one that made sense. He didn't say, "I want to fight for the belt next." He that's gonna bug me now until I remember or look it up. I think he called somebody out. I might be misremembering. Because I know he got asked. I mean, everyone does at this point.
Oh, Shogun. That's the fight he wants. Shogun.
Okay. Sure. Everyone wants to fight Shogun at this point.
I mean, it's kind of, look, if you're Teixeira, you're not going to be fighting John Jones for the title. Might as well.
Yeah, so
Shogun is hanging in there. He probably should be retired at 38. But whatever.
They're still trying to make that third fight with him and Little Nog for some reason.
Is Little Nog still fighting? Is Rogerio still fighting? Ugh.
They were supposed to have this would be their third fight at UFC 250. Back before the pandemic screwed everything up. About the scheduling, yeah, that was going to be. Maybe
he can fight Rogerio. Maybe Glover can fight Rogerio.
Yeah, I don't know. He might be aiming more up in the ranks for his next fight, so we'll see.
He just beat number 4. Like, that's huge.
Yeah,
if you don't think Corey Anderson should be in the top 5, Anthony Smith is in the top 5.
Yeah, Smith should be.
What about Blachowicz?
Blachowicz is still kind of campaigning for the title shot, coming off of knocking out Corey Anderson. Dominic Reyes is still pitching for a rematch with John. John's now publicly entertaining heavyweight again. Who knows?
What do you want? Do you want a rematch with Dominic Reyes, a fight with Blachowicz for Jones, or a fight at heavyweight?
I don't actually think I have a dog in that particular hunt.
If I were picking, I would want Blachowicz, Jones versus Blachowicz. Just because I think Blachowicz has earned it.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're talking about like from a fight quality standpoint, I think they all kind of look relatively similar, depending on who he's matched up with at heavyweight. If we're talking about, again, just kind of the machinery going, yeah, Blachowicz is the next guy up. I mean, I think the reality is
Reyes versus Teixeira.
Be a rough fight for Teixeira, man. Real rough.
So what?
Again, he might be able to pull it off.
Reyes, I think Reyes needs to prove he can beat like that main event level type fighter again. This fight solidly puts Teixeira back in the top 5. I don't know. I'm not on the Reyes hype train. I got to be honest. I think to me, that fight with Jones just showed me he couldn't seal the deal.
It depends on what you mean by seal the deal.
He couldn't go that extra 5 feet.
I mean, he lost the last 2
Jones and beat Jones.
Define beat in this instance.
Finish him.
No one's finished him.
Dominate him. Whatever.
No one's finished him. No one's dominated.
No one finished or dominated Fedor until Fabrizio Verdum.
Verdum didn't dominate him, but he did finish him.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and how realistic an expectation was that for Fabrizio Verdum going into that fight?
Not realistic at all. That's my point.
So how unrealistic are your expectations going to be until someone does the miraculous?
Unreal. It's not miraculous. It's not miraculous. Anything can happen in a fight on any given
By
night.
definition, that makes it miraculous. Okay, anything can happen. Sure. What's the probability?
That's not the
That's
definition of. That's not miraculous.
Okay,
that's
fair
not
enough.
Miraculous.
Okay,
That's
then let's define miraculous as something with a less than 3% chance of happening realistically.
Okay, but everyone's going crazy over Reyes. What gave that he had a competitive fight with Jones, but he didn't. I don't feel like he beat Jones. I'm sorry. I don't think he won that fight.
If we're scoring the fight as a whole, probably not.
Okay.
I think if you go round by round, yeah, he wins the first 3.
All right. Fair enough.
That's not where I landed live. That is where I've landed after rewatching it.
But if I were to book it, I would book Jones against Blachowicz, and then Teixeira against Reyes in a main event.
Yeah.
Now,
I think whoever Reyes fights next, it does need to be a main event. I do think we need to see potentially him get into those 4th and 5th rounds again.
That's what I'm talking about here. Second of all, there are all sorts of issues here. Jones's legal issues. 1, Jones constantly getting into trouble again and again. 2, 3, the very real possibility Jones might have to relinquish a title again at some point because of 1 and 2. So there you go. He got arrested again recently, as I recall, during the pandemic, right?
About a month ago at this point, I think. Yeah. They already figured out what's going on with that, though.
Well, I was in my stay-at-home quarantine and away from the show. It was April 3rd, so we're well into the quarantine at that point.
Yeah. And he got sentenced for that. His plea deal's already been accepted. That's done with as far as that goes.
Is it? I'm not gonna say it.
Well, again, look, you want to reset the clock until Jones screws up again, sure. Like, that's a reasonable thing.
That's it. That's not what I was thinking about, but good point.
No, he got I'm trying to remember what it wound up being. I think extended.
It's another slap on. He got another legal slap on the wrist.
I think I talked about this when it happened. He's very lucky that it happened when it did, because a lot of courts all over the country are going out of their way and have been for a lot of the pandemic
Jones has been lucky through all of this, Robert, through all of his legal issues.
Some of it's less luck and more good prep. Here, I think it's very fortunate that a lot of courts are going out of their way to give non-violent offenders something other than jail time to help avoid the spread of COVID.
Right.
Look, I think if in the normal course of the world what happens to him happens, I don't think he gets the same punishment legally. Not saying he's going to be. Not saying he would have been locked up for an extended period of time or anything, but he would not have gotten what he got. All right. Moving on from that fight, unless there's anything else we want to say about Smith or Teixeira. Ben Rothwell defeated Ovens. You know what? I think we're just going to do quick hits on the rest of this.
Yeah.
Ben Rothwell defeats Oven St. Preux via split decision, 29-28. This fight sucked. Oven St. Preux trying out heavyweight because... in all honesty, at this point, if you're Oven St. Preux, why not? Just avoid cutting weight. You're not making a run at the top. You are who you are as a fighter. Get paid more. Enjoy your food. Fight sucked. Drew Dober defeated Alexander Hernandez via TKO 425 of the second. Drew Dober looked great. He really seems to have ironed out some of those issues that he was having earlier in his career. His takedown defense is really good. His ability to bounce back up if he is taken down has gone up. Very smart decision-making about his offense. And it's not that Hernandez looked awful. Hernandez looked pretty good. He was able to land punches of his own, had some control time, but Dober just patient, methodical, found openings. Drew Dober's fairly legit. I think he needs a more top shelf lightweight next. He's on a 4 or 5 fight winning streak, I think. Okay, 3. He's 6-1 in his last 7, only losing to Beneil Dariush. He's finished his last 3 opponents. So, yeah, give him someone. What are the lightweight rankings right now, actually? Have a look. I know these haven't been updated for the end of this particular week yet. Give him. Barboza doesn't count anymore. Yeah, sure. Give him
Don't
Ally
get me
Quinta.
started on Barboza.
I'm just saying he doesn't count as for the lightweight rankings at the moment after dropping to featherweight, in my opinion. Give him Ally Quinta, sure. Let's do Dober and Iaquinta. That'll be fun. Ricky Simone defeated Ray Borg via split decision again, 29-28. Borg had good boxing in this, but flat on his feet and just the smaller guy. A lot of his scramble ability was somewhat neutralized. Simone just bigger, physically stronger. Good punches of his own. It's a fun fight. Fun bantamweight fight. Andrei Arlovsky defeated Felipe Lins via unanimous decision. 2 30-27s and a 29-28. I don't understand 30-27 for Arlovsky at all. But Lins had a good first round, and then Arlovsky, as Arlovsky does these days, just kind of ground the pace of everything to a halt so that he can fight comfortably and kind of eked it out. Not a good fight. Thiago Moises defeated Michael Johnson via a straight Achilles lock, 25 seconds into the second round. The fairly traditional at this point Michael Johnson performance looked really, really good in the first round. Really good. Mixing up his offense to the body and head, cutting Moises off. Fast hands, good, not great footwork, but good footwork. And then fall apart in the second when Moises charges, grabs a single, pulls down for like X guard, wraps up a straight foot lock, turns the angle, forces the tap. Keith Peterson, the referee, missed the first tap. So Johnson had to tap again, and his knee was put under more strain. It was announced as a heel hook, I think, live. Not a heel hook. The heel was not actually hooked. This was a straight foot or Achilles lock. You see that a lot in Sambo. It's harder to get in MMA. It's hard to get when you're not wearing wrestling shoes, in all honesty. But credit to Moises for pulling it off. Good win for him. On the prelims, Sijara Eubanks defeated Sarah Morris via unanimous decision, 30-27 twice and 1 30-26. Utterly uninteresting fight. Omar Morales defeated Gabriel Benitez via unanimous decision, 30-27 and then 2 29-28s. Really good fight, actually. These two kind of banged it out. Both men landed. Both men had good showings. Fun fight. At featherweight, up from his normal division, Brian Kelleher knocked out Hunter Azure at 3 minutes 40 seconds of the second round. Really nice left hook from Kelleher that did it. Surprised Kelleher was as good as he was up at featherweight. He was visibly the smaller man, but Azure couldn't really make the most out of that. And kicking everything off, Chase Sherman defeated Isaac Villanueva via TKO, 49 seconds of the second round. Sherman just the better heavyweight by and large. Good use of elbows, good use of knees, fought longer. Not great. If it had gone any longer, it would have been really bad. But, credit to Sherman for getting a much-needed win in his UFC return and for giving one of the most both hilarious and accurate descriptions. Like he was asked how it feels to be back in the UFC after being out, and his response was, "You ever order a 10-piece of wings and they bring you an 11th?" So I do actually know the feeling he's talking about. So good on you, Chase. All right, Jeff. Again, a lot of filler on this card. Some decent fights. What stuck out to you?
Why is Arlovsky still fighting?
Because they're paying him $350,000 flat fee.
Are they really paying him that much?
Dude, Overeem makes $500,000.
But Arlovsky,
yeah,
I know he is a former UFC heavyweight champion, but I mean, they even let him. They let him go from the UFC back in the day. That was over 10 years ago.
No, he makes. I think he's on a flat fee because I know he banked $350 for this. So unless he's 175 and 175, which is still, by the way, underpaying him. If we want to get technical about how much money these guys make. But yeah, look, he's still fighting because he has some name value. He's still fighting because they're paying him a lot of money.
He went on a 5-fight losing streak.
He did.
They kept him on the roster.
Surprised the heck out of me.
And then he fought Junior Albini, and it was one of the worst fights. And he got a win, and it was one of the worst fights I had ever seen.
Andre hasn't had a good fight in years.
And I know he beat Ben Rothwell, who fought last week, and he won, but on the same card. But is that really even an accomplishment at this point? No offense, Ben Rothwell.
I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not anything to hang your hat on.
Let's see, where is he?
I don't think
if he's in the if he's in the rankings, I'm going to freak out.
I don't think he is. No,
he's not even ranked at heavyweight.
Look, for some reason they decided to rank Verdum at number 15 despite him coming back and losing.
Well, he was a former heavyweight champion. Arguably, Verdum was still ranked when he left, right? Or what was it?
Probably.
When he had the steroid layoff.
He had the USADA suspension. It's heavyweight, man. I don't know what to tell you. Neither does my dog, apparently.
All right. I think we can move on.
Alrighty. That will bring us to what was for us yesterday's card. UFC on ESPN 8. Also known as, hey, let's see how many times we can talk about Walt Harris's murdered daughter in 6 hours.
Ugh.
I got to talk about this off the top because I understand that you have to give context. I understand Walt Harris was participating. I understand that taken in isolation, if all you saw was that little video piece they put together once, it's done well in an isolated sense. I don't need to see it, 4 times over the course of a 6-hour broadcast. And I really don't need commentary talking about it between every fight. Like,
it was weird.
This got into
does it make me a bad person for pointing this out?
What?
I was weirded out by it last night, and it bothered me.
In what sense? Just that they talked about it at all, the amount of times they talked about it.
First, just let me say, I what happened to Walt Harris is devastating, and I can't even imagine what he and his family went through. The way it came across on TV, it was I don't know. It almost felt like it became trivial by just
repetition.
Not just repetition, by just like it almost felt like they were trying to make a story out of it,
Yeah.
Like it felt, and it felt as a result, it felt trivialized.
I believe the word you're looking for is exploitative.
A little bit.
I think they kind of got into that territory with it over the course of the broadcast.
I was weirded out when they did that video package we saw, I think, at UFC 249 or beforehand, before this fight card, where like it reminded me of the UFC exploiting the bus attack in the video blogs and everything, and like doing all that edited footage on like you're like this is the worst thing that ever happened ever in the UFC, but you're using it to sell your product. And I don't know. I'm not even sure Walt Harris should have even been in this main event. I have no issue with him fighting again if that's what he wanted to do. I don't know. Am I wrong to feel this way?
No,
Am I
I
an
think that
asshole?
no. There's a lot of individual mileage about this type of stuff that varies. Some people couldn't watch stuff like America's Most Wanted, and I know you and I are both old enough to remember that show. Some people just objected to the premise. They thought that was made them uncomfortable. Thought that was exploitative. Despite John Walsh's kind of statements to the contrary and the emotional place he was coming from when he started working on that project. And anyone who wants to know more about that is free to look it up. I don't want to go into it. For me, it was just how much they did it that kind of bothered me. And somebody else brought this up. I can't remember. I saw it on Twitter. I apologize. I don't remember the person who said it. But ESPN is borderline obsessed with tragedy in their coverage of sport. And that's not just MMA. That's anything. They tend to focus in on that fairly heavily. And I don't watch enough ESPN coverage to say whether that's true or not. I'm not, but I saw enough people agreeing with the sentiment that I think it probably at least deserves to be acknowledged. Again, for me, the way they handled the totality of this over the entire broadcast and all the lead up to this event, I thought they crossed the line of good taste. And I'm just going to say that.
Okay, I think what my issue is I felt like they built the whole event around it, and it felt iffy to build the whole event around that.
Yeah.
It did feel exploitive is probably a good word to say it. Like, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not saying I disrespect Walt Harris, right? I'm just saying
you're talking about how the coverage of the event was handled.
Well, I mean, you build the whole event that way. How can you want any other result other than Walt Harris winning?
Yeah.
And what if Walt Harris loses? Like, after everything, it's just weird. It's weird.
They did put. They did, again, essentially put the audience in a very bizarre position. And then that, again, it kind of wound up biting them because if we're talking about the fight itself, Alistair Overeem defeats Walt Harris 3 minutes of the second round via TKO. Harris had a good 2.5 minutes, give or take. First bit of the first round, little back and forth. Both men find some success. Harris clips
Murgliata being very lenient in that first round after that initial flurry by Harris.
Yeah, Harris clips Overeem a few times in close, drops him against the fence, looks to swarm. Overeem covers up, looks to pull guard. Harris stands over trying to punch. Unfortunately for Harris, he missed a lot. A lot of the punches he was throwing in that flurry wound up being blocked. Then Overeem eventually comes up on a double leg. Harris defends. They break. Harris throws a kick, slips. Overeem gets on top of him and spends the last 2 minutes and 40 some odd seconds basically doing a Khabib impression against the fence, punching him in the face with his left hand.
What did you score the first round?
I actually went 10-10. I scored that a flat draw.
Okay, fair enough.
I think if you break it down, because at about the 2 minute mark of the round, we're looking at a 10-8 for Harris. And then 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, we've seen nothing but Harris on his back or on his hip getting punched in the face.
Okay.
So I think if you're going to give the round to someone, you might have to lean Harris because he came closer to a finish. But for me, it just kind of balanced out to a 10-10. Second round, Harris is kind of gassed, and between the flurry he went after and then carrying Overeem's weight, he just wasn't quite the same. Overeem head kicks him, gets on top, gets full back mount, flattens him out. Doesn't really unload. Again, he's not dealing tremendous damage with each of these strikes, but the way he's got people, again, if you look at guys with really good back mount, you're not flat on the ground. You're actually bowed up. Their downward pressure with the hips and legs actually creates kind of like a dish. So you're actually bowed up at the feet and at the head, and it's a nightmare to get out of. And Harris couldn't get out, and he wasn't getting bombed on, but he was essentially checkmated positionally, and then and after it was clear he couldn't improve his position, the ref waved it off. I think I saw from someone on Twitter say that this is the most Alistair. I think this was I think it was the Naked Gambler. I don't know if anyone else follows him. I don't follow him, but he does appear in my feed from time to time. It's one of the most Alistair Overeem things ever that the one time he refuses to be knocked out is the one time everyone is rooting against him. I don't know what you go with Overeem from here. I forget who he called out. Or if he called anyone out. He just wants another top heavyweight and to potentially make another run at the belt. Top of heavyweight again. We talked about a little bit about that already. It's kind of a log jam. But in all fairness, if we're talking just about quality of win, it's a solid enough win for Overeem. I mean, he's now 3-3 in his last 6.
He can fight Rosenstruik
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could do that rematch, I guess.
Olenek. Has he fought Olenek or Volkov?
He beat Olenek.
Beat Olenek.
I don't think he's fought Volkov.
Volkov is an option.
As far as Olenek goes, there's some people have been doing some math about something because Olenek wants to fight again, and there's some talk about he's been offered a fight.
Derek Lewis.
Yeah, because they haven't said, I don't think they've name dropped Derek Lewis, but they said top heavy, like top 5. And then somebody did the elimination math on all the others who aren't available. So Olenek and Lewis is kind of something that we're thinking is on the horizon.
And I'm not trying to bash Walt Harris, Robert, but his grappling is terrible. His cardio isn't good.
I mean, anybody that
his
big.
His takedown, but he's never had good takedown defense. Come on, ever.
Hang on, let me go back to some of his fights.
Lost to Jared Rochalts, got knocked out by Nikita Krylov at heavyweight, Soa Pelele, Shamil Abdurakhimov.
Beat him mostly with grappling, yeah. Yeah, it's been kind of a hole in his game.
He's a 13-8 fighter. Like, that's not a very good record in my mind.
Oh, come on. They're letting a guy into the Hall of Fame who has a terrible record. It only carries so much weight.
Yeah, but he's also fought in the UFC since 2013. Most of his losses are inside the UFC.
He only has one loss outside of it, actually.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's not a very good record.
No, and again, he seemed to be turning it around recently. He had kind of that good string of finishes, but I think just part of the reality is when you're dealing with people this big, there's always a handful of restrictions that you're going to run up against that are just sort of inevitabilities. One is cardio. Walt Harris is a big guy. Anybody that's, 250, 260, your cardio is going to suck. You're just moving so much mass around. There's always going to be that giant limiter on it. Your bottom game is probably not going to be great, not just because of some of the physical realities of moving on bottom, but also because of the weight factor of the people who are on top of you.
He's not good with grappling, takedowns, anything. He can hit hard, and he's a good puncher.
He can hit hard, and he's fairly athletic for a big guy.
Sure.
But yeah, he's not been able to really consistently translate that into the grappling realm. And that's a significant part of the sport. You've got to be able to deal with it.
Is it a victory that he just got into the cage last night?
100%.
Okay.
The strength of spirit it takes to get up and function in what could be considered a healthy way after that kind of tragedy is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
To get up and then compete at a high level is, again, it is a strength of your personality and spirit that is beyond the majority of humanity. Most people will never get into a cage and fight. Most people will never get into a fight, period. Most people will never at all fight professionally. Of the people that fight professionally, most of them will never compete under circumstances that adverse when it comes to personal tragedy. I mean, when you're dealing with trying to move on with your life after something like that, you get up, you take a shower, you go to work, you function normally. That's a giant victory. I mean, Kat Zingano talked a lot about that after her husband committed suicide. Anytime something unexpected, anytime something like that happens, yeah, just the ability to get up and keep going is a giant. I mean, heck, when it happens normally, if your 80-some-odd-year-old grandfather or parent or what have you passes, even then it's a hard thing to deal with. To deal with, something like suicide or murder, to just get up and keep going is a giant victory.
Not to mention going into an octagon and fighting someone.
And then fighting, a wrecking machine like Overeem. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Next up, Claudia Gadelha defeated Angela Hill via split decision. Somewhat contentious. I scored it for Hill, I seem to recall live. I don't really disagree with 29-28 either way. It is a fairly typical Claudia Gadelha fight in that she comes out hard in the first round, gasses 2.5 minutes into the second, and then we see who can pull it out in the third. And Angela Hill's gas tank and technique were not equal to the task of fighting Gadelha in the third round. I've mentioned this before, and I don't know that I don't make a giant point of it, but Angela Hill's gas tank is... look, Gadelha's is a fairly known quantity at this point, right? We all know about her cardio issues. Hill's don't get talked about a lot, but her third rounds are typically not great unless she's been dominating a fight. If she's the one dictating the pace through the entire fight, she's okay. If she's on the back foot at all, that third round for her is rough. And when you arguably get outworked in the third round by Gadelha, that's a pretty big indicator of an issue you've got to work on. Not a bad fight, but I don't see either of these women making tremendous headway in terms of upward mobility, but I could be wrong about that. I think Gadelha is just kind of past her prime, and Hill is running up against physical and competition level limitations that I'm not sure she'll be able to get around.
I thought the fight sucked.
Okay.
And this is just kind of the story of Hill's career. She'll win a few and then she'll run into a higher level opponent. Can't really break through the wall.
I mean, at this point, she's basically, the strawweight version of Cowboy. Fights all the time. Fights in a again, maybe not to the same level.
She does not fight or have the victories at a high level that Cowboy has.
No, she doesn't. But we're dealing about a thinner division over a shorter time period.
Okay.
And
I don't.
Well, again, look.
I don't agree with the comparison.
Okay, hang on. Here's what Cerrone does, right? He fights 5 times a year, 5 times every 12 months, give or take. Wins more than he loses, but loses the big ones. And fights in a style that is largely engaging. Angela Hill fights. This was her 5th fight in 12 months.
I don't think her style is that engaging.
I don't know. I don't really have a problem with it. Again, I have an issue with her cardio tank, but if we're talking about just is her style more watchable than the average fighter, yeah. But again, she fights in a fairly fan-friendly style. She fights all the time. She beats a lower level of opposition and then inevitably runs into a wall at the top. That's the story of Cerrone at this point. It's the story of a lot of people. But again, strawweight's in an odd spot. We don't quite know what's next for Zhang anyway. Whether they're going to try and run back the Ioana fight, whether if they can make the Namajunas Andrade rematch happen, whether the winner of that gets a shot at Zhang. But I think Adelia is kind of on the outside looking in, all things considered. After the fight, she called out Carla Esparza, which was an odd choice because she already beat Esparza.
Well, she's not getting a title shot.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe get another win, pad the resume a little bit. Maybe try to make it more emphatic. Maybe she feels that this time around she can have a real kind of standout performance against Esparza. I don't know.
Esparza just beat Karate Hottie, so there you go.
Boy, that fight sucked too. Women's strawweight is the deepest division that women have. I think it's the kind of the sweet spot for athletic women as far as MMA goes. But man, they have had some awkward matchups recently. All right. Featherweight fight between Dan Ige and Edson Barboza. Dan Ige wins via split decision. Live, I scored this for Ige. Rewatching it, I scored it for Barboza. I don't think I really appreciated how badly the left knee to the body hurt Ige towards the end of the second. But this was I found this to be a very engaging fight. Ige has good movement, pretty sharp punches. Barboza moved around, leg kicks, knees, the pretty typical Barboza game. Barboza doesn't quite seem to have the same pop at featherweight that he did at lightweight. But, again, largely an enjoyable fight. And the biggest win of Ige's career, because that's going to go down as a win even if you think he lost. You said don't get me started on Barboza, Jeff. So what precipitated that?
You can't put lipstick on a pig, Robert.
I mean, you can.
You put lipstick on a pig, what do you have?
Pig with lipstick on it.
Exactly. What I mean by that, what did moving down to featherweight give Barboza for this fight? Did it give him any advantage, any substantial advantage at all that translated into a victory? No. The answer is no, it did not. Barboza is still a fighter who does not do well with aggression. You just got to move forward, aggressively go after him, and you can beat him. He didn't walk away with a win here. It wasn't an impressive performance. He was not able to reinvent himself as a featherweight. So he cut the extra weight. What did it really do for him here? Nothing. It gained him nothing.
I mean, yeah, he did officially lose the fight. That sucks for him, though. That is 2 split decisions in a row I thought he won. But yeah, I don't know what he does from here. I don't know if he sticks around at featherweight or not. I mean, he made the weight. And
yeah, he made the weight.
Did not
why do you move down in weight at this point in your career after having this many fights in the UFC? What are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to reinvent yourself. You're trying to become a contender.
Maybe
he wasn't able to do that last night.
Maybe he just likes. He might like how he feels at featherweight. I don't know.
Do you think he did based on his performance?
I have no idea. Jose Aldo still swears up and down he feels better at bantamweight than he did at featherweight.
Do you believe that?
I don't know. I mean, he fought better in that fight with Moraes than he had in his last couple of featherweight fights. So I don't know. He might like it. He might prefer the level of competition, even if he doesn't have a better chance of winning. He might be at lesser risk of giant physical damage. He's also fought basically everyone at lightweight already. How many fresh matchups exist for that guy? So I don't know. I don't know what precipitated it. I think even if he kind of figures out the formula at featherweight for optimal performance, featherweight's a fairly deep division. It's not like he's going to just buzzsaw through a bunch of nobodies.
I wasn't impressed with Barboza at all last night.
I mean, Barboza, if we're talking about his fights, when was the last impressive one?
Let's see.
I mean, win, lose, or draw.
Getting knocked out by Gagey in 2 minutes, I guess. Dan Hooker.
Okay, he looked pretty good in the Hooker fight.
Yeah.
But
Dan
that's
Hooker.
what? So 1 fight in his last 6?
Yeah.
End of the road is coming for Barboza sooner rather than later.
Because let's see. He's 34 now. He's not a young man anymore. And this has just kind of been the story of his career. Now he's on a 3-fight losing streak.
Yeah, again, I thought he beat Felder in their rematch.
I thought Felder would probably more likely win the first fight.
Haven't seen the first fight in too long a period of time. So again, I don't know if he sticks around at featherweight. I don't know if he moves back up to lightweight. Again, big name on Ige's resume, if nothing else. And he wants someone else. He was number 15, I think, coming into this. Confirm that real quick. Yeah. I think he should fight. He called out. He said, "I'll fight Zabit. I'll fight Yair. I'll fight Cater or Stevens or whatnot." Any of those would be fine fights. That or maybe Shane Burgos. I think he and Shane Burgos would have a heck of a fight. But yeah, I think he's due a more notable. He's due a ranked opponent. Because this was, I think, 4 in a row for him. Excuse me. 6. This was his 6th win in a row. His only loss in the UFC was in his debut. Jeez. So, yeah, give that guy some ranked opposition next, please. All right, at middleweight, Krzysztof Jotko defeated Eric Anders via unanimous decision, 30-27 to 29-28. You can all say it with me, this fight sucked. Jeff, Jotko, Anders, anything?
Why is Anders still in the UFC?
That's a very fair question. I don't really have an answer.
The fight sucked.
Yep. And kicking off the main card, Song Yadong defeated Marlon Vera via unanimous decision. The unanimous nature of this surprised me. I think I scored it for Vera live. I gave Vera the first, Song the second, and I think I gave Vera the third. A lot of other people seem to be more on the Vera won the second, should have won, 29-28. I thought Song had the second round. So I might be very wrong about the third, in all honesty. I mean, Song closed stronger, but it took him, about 3 minutes to get going in the third. Good fight. Vera normally fights at bantamweight, so I don't think this will hurt his stock too much. This was up at featherweight. And, Song hasn't lost in the UFC yet. And his hype died because he went to a draw in his fight prior to this one, and everyone just kind of jumped off the train, so to speak. He's still really good. I think he's another guy who should probably be looking at some ranked opposition next. I don't know who exactly, but someone like a Sadiq Youssef, Arnold Allen, maybe somewhere in that range. But this was a pretty good fight. This card, again, had a lot of good fights on it. So, all right, Jeff, how'd you feel about this one? Who'd you score it for?
See. Song Yadong.
Okay.
Fight sucked.
Oh, come on. This was a good fight. Those two got after it.
I gave it to you, Dong.
You can't team me up like that, man. You just can't. I'm going to say something that's going to get us both in trouble. All right. As for the prelims, Miguel Baeza defeated Matt Brown via TKO punches, 18 seconds of the second round. Brown looked pretty good through a lot of the first round. Then he got dropped. Then he came back and dropped Baeza. They had a good back and forth fight. Second round, Baeza just shifts his feet a little bit as they both throw left hooks. He's got faster hands anyway. He lands first. He lands flush. All she wrote. Fun little brawl. Kevin Holland defeated Anthony Hernandez via TKO, 39 seconds of the first round. Kevin Holland came out and he wanted to run through Hernandez like a train, man. They got close pretty quick. Hard elbow behind the ear, off balance is Hernandez. Follows that up with a knee right into the solar plexus. Hernandez goes down. Holland pounds him out. Easily the best Kevin Holland has looked in the UFC. Easily. Giga Chikadze defeated Erwin Rivera via unanimous decision, 30-26, and then two 30-27s. I think I was 30-25. Erwin Rivera, normally a bantamweight, took this fight on like 2 days' notice after Mike Davis fell out. Apparently, Chikadze and Davis have been... The UFC has tried to make that pairing for all of Giga Chikadze's UFC appearances, and it keeps falling apart due to Davis, so maybe stop. Wound up being a showcase for Chikadze, just beating a smaller guy. Kicks, knees, distance management. Again, as far as showcase fights go, it was good. And Rivera has a heck of a chin on him. He ate some tough blows, including a really, really bad knee in the third, and just kept on trucking. Nate Landwehr defeated Darren Elkins via unanimous decision. Bloody, weird, sloppy brawl. I scored it for Landwehr. Man, Elkins' face got... I feel like you could say about Darren Elkins at any given point in his life, Darren Elkins' face like he got pushed through a windshield, but man, he got pushed through a windshield in this one. Nate Landwehr's first UFC win. Again, sloppy brawl, but hey, enjoyable if you're into that sort of thing, and I can be from time to time. Courtney Casey hit a really nice armbar, actually, on Mara Romero Barella at 3:36 of the first round. Casey looks a little better at flyweight, I think, than she did at strawweight. Not quite as drawn out. There's still some of the tactical issues that she has, but I'd like to see her, try flyweight for more than just the one fight, because her strawweight stuff was not really going anywhere. And kicking everything off, Rodrigo Nascimento defeated Dante Almays via rear naked choke in the second round. Solid all-around game from Nascimento, who called out Chase Sherman after the fight. Sure, make that fight. Couple of low-level heavyweights. Makes as much sense as anything else. All right, Jeff, what are your thoughts on that? Anything stick out to you from the prelims?
Darren Elkins, thank you for getting brain damage for our sins. He tends to have fun, bloody brawls like this, but I worry about the long-term damage that's being done in his life, but I thank him for that. Miguel Baeza, knockout of Matt Brown was fun, even though I'm a big Matt Brown fan. Courtney Casey's armbar on Romero Barella. There was some entertaining action on the prelims. I think the prelims mostly were more entertaining than the main card, honestly.
For a couple of them, yeah. There's at least two fights that the prelims were much more entertaining than. Okay, that was, again, UFC on ESPN 8. Thanks to everyone who followed along with my coverage of that or both events. Man, nobody seemed to care about either of these two events.
And I believe the next fight will not be until May 30th, supposedly, or will be May 30th, which is in less than 2 weeks. So,
yeah, I think the original plan was to have one the 27th. That just isn't going to pan out for whatever reason. Either Nevada's not opening up on the schedule the UFC wants, or they just burned through all of the fighters that they had at their disposal. So they're pushing back the next event to the 30th, and at the moment, the UFC kind of publicly stated that if the UFC Apex Center is not open because Nevada is still doing what Nevada is doing now, they're looking at, I think they said Arizona is as a viable state to host whatever venue specifically. So they're going to give themselves an extra week.
And they can't open their Mortal Kombat Enter the Dragon Fight Island until June.
Assuming that timeline is accurate, yeah, that seems to be what they're saying.
At June at the earliest. So this fight will either be at the UFC Apex or possibly Arizona, if Arizona is open up to pro sports at that time, which is none of that is official, by the way. So,
still flying by the seat of our pants.
Right.
Hooray.
So,
all right.
Tyron Woodley versus Gilbert Burns, Augusto Sakai versus Blagoy Ivanov, Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Siffers are what's being talked about for that card.
Yeah. That's all we have kind of recently announced for it. And again, it's only 4 fights out of a potential 12-fight card, 11 or 12.
They should just pay Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley what they want and get them to fight each other. People will go for it. It would make money.
It would, in theory. But the UFC doesn't really like either of them, so they're not going to go out of their way to accommodate their demands. They don't go out of the way to accommodate the demands of any fighter.
By the way, I firmly believe what Cejudo did is a public negotiation. I don't believe for a second that retirement is sticking.
Wouldn't shock me.
If 10 years, I'll believe it within 10 years if he has not fought again. Then I will believe it. 10 years. There you go.
Might also depend on what he does, on what activity he engages in next.
Supposedly real estate, but we'll see.
If he's looking for non-competition related stuff, yeah. I know some boxers have mentioned they'd like to box him, and he. I don't know. It
sounds like a terrible idea if you're Cejudo.
Depends on the paycheck. You make more money in boxing.
I mean,
especially the guys that we're talking about.
Is a boxing promoter going to pay him $3.5 million or more to get inside a boxing ring to box someone?
$3.5 million, probably not.
Because that I think is the type of money he wanted from Dana White in the UFC.
Yeah, he's not getting that. If we're talking realistically.
Okay.
I think there's a higher probability of him finding a boxing bout that will net him $1 million than finding an MMA fight.
Nick Diaz couldn't. So I mean,
Nick Diaz, while a popular figure, does not have the athletic credibility that Cejudo does. Does not have the broad-based appeal that Cejudo does. I'm really surprised.
Nick Diaz has a ton of broad-based appeal.
Hang on. I'm really surprised. You can drop Cejudo into Mexico City, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really surprised the UFC didn't make a bigger deal out of trying to make Cejudo the next kind of Latino crossover star.
Yeah, that's my thing. That's what I don't get, because they tried so hard to do that with Kane, and it wasn't always their fault, but it just didn't happen, right?
Yeah, and Cejudo kind of leaned away from it as far as how he was promoting himself even. It was a really odd decision.
But he's bilingual. He's Mexican American.
He's first generation American, isn't
he? His parents are from Mexico, are they not?
Yeah, but you're a Mexican American if you have dual citizenship. You're an American.
All right, all right. He's of Mexican descent, Robert. You know what I mean.
It's a fairly important legal distinction, actually. But yeah, I do know what you mean. I know what you mean.
If someone's Italian American, come on here. Someone who's Italian American isn't of dual citizenship, Robert. Come on. You know what I'm talking about.
That is kind of how I approach it, actually. Yeah.
Uh,
Other distinctions don't really serve much purpose.
Okay. Now I'm getting angry. My point is he could have been that crossover star for Mexico.
Yeah. There was a real possibility of that, I think.
And I don't know. I don't get why they didn't try that with him. I don't get. To me, he's a guy you want to make happy and pay him more, but I don't get it. I'm not seeing why.
Yeah, some of that also comes down to, again, how much he's asking for, how much he's realistically worth, how much the UFC hates paying fighters in general.
UFC 249 did good numbers.
Yeah, I'm starting to question their self-reporting on that.
Who?
Well, the 700,000 or so number was essentially self-reported by the UFC, right?
Oh, you're saying they gave that number to Kevin Aoli?
I don't know. I probably. Look.
John Orand of Sports Business Journal reported that the number would exceed 700,000.
Yeah, we don't have the hard
All right,
numbers
you don't
yet.
think so you don't think John Orand is a legit reporter and did not report legitimate numbers?
Hold on, I didn't say that. I said I'm not. One, he's not disclosing his sources.
Okay.
Which, to be fair, he does not.
Many reporters do not.
He does not have to, nor should he have to. Okay. But it does mean that I, as a consumer, as a consumer of what he's saying, do have to go, okay, how much stock am I going to put in this? And I'm not saying nothing, but the ratings for the prelims for UFC 249 that aired on ESPN were lower than the previous set of pay-per-view prelims, which did an event that did significantly lower than 700,000. Now, again,
those aren't an exact science, though.
I'm aware. Maybe the fact that more people had to purchase this as solo acts or as small gatherings rather than the ability to go out into more public gatherings or to see it at a sports bar or what have you. A lot of factors. I'm not saying it's incorrect. I'm saying at the moment.
You're not saying it's fake news.
I'm not saying it's fake news. I'm saying it is unconfirmed.
Okay.
And
I'm saying Henry Cejudo pay him $3.5 million. I'd be fine with it.
Look, every fighter is underpaid. All of them. Down whole UFC roster. Everyone who has ever fought for the UFC has always been underpaid.
I think you should pay Cejudo more because think about this. He is the only Olympic gold medalist to ever become a UFC champion. 2 weight division champion, defends both those titles, beats TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, Marlon Moraes, Dominic Cruz, bilingual, can go for that Mexican demographic that UFC has been wanting to break into for years, that Cain Velasquez was not able to do for them. Why do you not want to pursue that? You want to keep that guy. I think you ideally want to keep that guy happy and fighting for you as long as possible from a business perspective.
Some of that also depends on how much money he brings in. Again, we don't have a lot of hard numbers about how much he's worth in terms of dollar amounts.
Well, some of that might the report is they did in a global pandemic. The only report I have, they did over 700,000 buys for that pay-per-view that he co-headlined with Dominic Cruz. So there you go.
Again, I'm not saying he brings in nothing, but
I have no reason to doubt. I have no reason to doubt the numbers that are being reported. No reason. So
you're going to pay him and him alone 10% or so of the total revenue generated by that event?
I'm. Who said him alone?
You said you were going to pay Henry Cejudo the $3.5 million.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, assuming that event did 700,000 buys. Let's use 700,000 for math purposes.
Yeah.
$60 a pop.
No, it's more than 60 at this point. I paid for the pay-per-view. I paid $70.
Okay, 70. Sorry, my mistake. 70. Okay, so 700,000 buys. event drew then on pay-per-view about $49 million, give or take.
Okay.
You're going to throw about 10% of that, less than 10, but about 10% at one guy.
He's worth it. He is worth it.
Your co-headliner, your co-main event guy is worth 10% of the total revenue generated by that event.
Olympic gold medalist.
He already got paid for his gold medal.
Olympic gold medalist, 2-weight division champion, bilingual.
Okay.
Mexican heritage. Yes.
How much are you going to pay Tony Ferguson?
Tony Ferguson, I'd pay at least $1 million.
How much are you going to pay Gagey?
How much did he get paid for that fight?
I don't know. I'll look it up, actually.
Well, Gagey is now the interim champion, so now they have to pay him like a champion, do they not?
Correct.
Okay. So Gagey got $350K for that fight. That was his base pay.
Hang on.
Did he get or was it 175, or did he get show and win?
He'll be getting show and win.
Let's see. It's just. I mean, I think Gagey's worth at least $500,000, at least.
Okay, so you're paying the guy who won half of what the guy of the same amount the guy he beat. Okay, not actually that uncommon. So okay, how much are you paying Cruz?
See, how much did Cruz get?
$300K.
I think Cruz deserves at least $500K.
Okay, how much you paying Ngannou?
Ngannou's salary was how much?
$260,000.
Ngannou deserves a raise too, because he's a star. Ngannou gets $500K.
Okay, so you're already up to paying out $7 million.
Out of $49 million.
Hang on,
doesn't sound so bad.
We're not done.
Okay.
So we're up to 7. There's Cejudo's cut, and then there's Cejudo's cut of the pay-per-view. He was the champion going into this.
Yeah.
How much are you paying Rosenstruik?
So Rosenstruik's at $80,000. I'm keeping him at $80,000.
How much you paying Kattar?
Calvin Kattar, I'm keeping him what he got for this fight card.
So about 50 and 50?
Yeah, but he got 30% of Stevens' fight purse.
Yeah. I mean, Stevens missed weight badly. That's on him. How much you paying Greg Hardy?
Greg Hardy?
Yeah.
I'm paying him the Reebok money.
So you're paying him
just kidding.
$800? That will be delivered to his house in merchandise.
He's getting 180, right?
I don't know if he's 90 and 90 or flat 180.
90 and 90. They didn't really sell this card around Greg Hardy, though.
No. He was on the main card. He was on the main card of the pay-per-view. Okay.
I don't remember his fight being especially good.
Oh, it sucked.
45K.
You're gonna sign him to a contract for $45,000 to show and $45,000 to win.
Yep.
Okay. Good Lord, Jorgen De Castro's only on 12 and 12. That's criminal. That's just criminal.
Sure.
How much you paying Pettis?
Pettis got $310,000, so that means he got 155. His base pay is 155.
Assuming he's on show and win split, yeah, which is a whole other discussion about
So
whether
I'm looking at because I'm not able to find the show and win splits for this card.
It's Pettis. You know, Pettis might be flat. In all honesty, wouldn't shock me if he's just flat 310 to show. It's 310,000 straight up.
I'll just keep him at that.
All right, Cerrone.
Cerrone, I give him $1 million.
Give $1 million to the guy who just lost that fight. Okay.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
champion.
Yep.
You gonna try and justify paying Cerrone more than Pettis?
Nope.
When Pettis
he's Cowboy Cerrone.
When Pettis' manager calls, he's gonna, and his lawyers get on the phone and say, "Why are you paying my guy less?"
You're not Cowboy Cerrone.
We're a former champion.
Hmm.
Champion with title defense.
You got to be on the Wheaties box.
Yeah. Guess what? So essentially, you're just now going to lose Anthony Pettis as a UFC fighter.
Okay. You're asking me what I would pay them. You're bringing in feelings and you're bringing in all this extra.
Well, let's bring in the reality of it. Now, again, look, I'm happy. I've said this for a while. All fighters are underpaid. All of them.
I mean, the reality. Why is Greg Hart? Why is a scrub like Greg Hardy getting paid $100K? And why are the managers allowing that? So I mean, there you go.
Name value, and ESPN likes him for some unknown reason.
Okay.
I mean, look, if you want to know about where the real money is in terms of how the UFC operates, it's
is Greg Hardy bringing in money for the UFC? Is that quantifiable?
I don't know. They've never put him in a position where it's been.
They drew no live gate. They had no live gate.
The UFC doesn't need a live gate. You want to? That's one of the crazy things that has come out about some of the reporting around the UFC right now. Their live gate revenue, if we're talking about like total year revenue, it's less than 10%. The live tickets,
still makes a dent.
Not really, especially when you look at all the guaranteed money they have, and how that breaks down. The UFC can run.
They were going to draw a $5 million gate in New York for Khabib versus Tony.
Sure, and I'm not saying that's nothing.
That's nothing to sneeze at.
It's a lot of money that the fighters would not have seen any of.
They don't use any of the gate money to pay like the main event guys.
Unless you have it specifically in your contract, no.
Okay.
Now Khabib might at this point have that in his contract. Don't know. I guarantee you no one else does. Right? No one else on that card would have got any of the gate.
Okay, so there you go.
They don't. My point being, the UFC does not need a gate to continue functioning financially. They could lose that and be fine.
I don't have, from a promotional standpoint, I know you don't like Cejudo, but I feel like he's definitely worth a raise.
I mean, look, is he worth more than he's getting? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he definitely is.
100%. Again, everyone in the UFC is underpaid by an order of magnitude, at least a decimal point.
Okay, but I feel like Cejudo even more than most. When you look at all those credentials and all that he brings to the table.
And yeah, in a perfect world, probably. But the fact that the UFC underpays literally everyone who has ever fought for them.
You would not even agree they were underpaying Cejudo more than most. You won't even agree to that.
More than most?
Yeah.
Most in this case being, say, 50%? Okay, let me think.
Maybe not 3.5 million, but come on. What about 1 million? 1 million a fight.
1 million flat fee. Well, I mean, yeah, sure.
Plus his championship bonuses.
As long as he's which he has now lost, actually. But assuming he's champion, okay. Yeah, again.
He hasn't lost until he's outside of the USADA pool. I'm sorry.
Okay, again, there might be some argument about that. Okay, I'm saying for right now, he's retired in theory, and if he has actually vacated the title, then
McGregor is retired in theory, I think, twice already. So there you go.
Yeah, and he also wound up vacating his titles.
Sure.
So when he fought again, he did not have.
He was stripped. He was stripped of his title.
Either way.
Stripped.
Either way, he was no longer the champion when he fought again. Which means that he would not have had the same championship payout in his contract. Now, McGregor being McGregor, I'm sure had some other payout structure because he's the biggest star the sport has.
Okay. You're waffling because you don't like Cejudo and you think
I'm not waffling.
You're waffling because you don't like Cejudo and you think he's a windbag. Admit it.
I think he's a windbag, yes.
Okay.
Look, again, he's underpaid chronically. They all are. I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean I think that the solution to paying them more comes from just the UFC forking over more money for each particular fight, show, and win. I think that's very small thinking about this. That's the rough equivalent.
Don't you think it's short-sighted to let a guy like Cejudo go, knowing the UFC's interest in Mexico and what Cejudo brings to the table?
Short-sighted? No. Do I think? Hang on.
Why?
Do I think?
Why?
Hang on.
Why?
Someone else will come along. Hang on. If you're asking me if it's a mistake, yes. Yes, it's a mistake. But the UFC has weathered...
He'd just be Dominic Cruz, Robert.
The UFC, and much as I don't like them at times, their organization is designed to function regardless of star power, basically. They benefit from it, but they have weathered the loss of bigger stars. They've weathered long dearths without stars. Is Cejudo a missed opportunity? Yes. Is it a mistake to let him go? Yes. Is it crippling? No.
I'm not even saying crippling. I'm saying short-sighted.
Depends on how much. Depends on what you're giving up to keep him. Okay.
Not crippling, short-sighted.
Okay. That depends entirely on what you'd be giving up to keep him.
I would give him a seven. I would try to at least negotiate some sort of 7-figure payday for him.
I think that's reasonable.
Maybe not 3.5 million, but something that if we can get on the same page with him about, and maybe other incentives, I would try. And look, I'm not the head of a company or a promoter, so it's not my money. I'm speaking hypothetically. Just because I would say he's in the prime of his fighting career right now, and I would not want to see him go away just yet.
Yeah, that's all reasonable, and I don't think that's.
Thank you.
I don't think any of that's incorrect.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at.
And again, the only flip side is, again, we don't know the specifics of what he's asking for beyond the number that he's thrown out there is what he wants. And the UFC
the extra zero suggests he wants 3.5 million.
Yeah. And that's certainly a lofty goal. And in all honesty, if we're speaking objectively, yeah, that's what he should be making probably. That doesn't mean that's what the UFC is going to want to pay him and is going to decide to acquiesce to his particular conditions relative to what everyone else is asking for. The UFC is trying to juggle a tremendous amount of interest in that regard.
They gave Gilbert Melendez everything he wanted when he re-upped some years back.
Yeah, and look how that worked out for them.
Well, that's on them.
Yeah, and why do you think they're not doing it anymore? You got burned. You got burned pretty badly.
Okay.
So you're less likely to do it next time. What if you offer Henry Cejudo that?
Gilbert Melendez was not a champion, not an Olympic gold medalist.
Okay. Say you give Henry Cejudo the $1 million. He shows up, he loses. He shows up, he loses. You paid $3 million to a guy who lost 3 fights in a row.
At least there'll be fun fights, and least they'll have Captain Cringe.
Hold on. Cejudo had a lot of boring fights. Let's not pretend he didn't.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's where he's trended.
He turned his career around, became an exciting fighter.
Yeah, and
made the most of it.
And we've all look. One of the things you talked about with Melendez, he got his big contract and he mentally checked out.
Right.
We're going to pretend that Henry Cejudo might not.
To me,
again,
to me, that risk is greater than what they did with Hector Lombard. At least, unlike Hector Lombard, he has an Olympic gold medal. At least, unlike Hector Lombard, he can win a UFC championship. So to me, that's already makes him infinitely more invaluable than a Hector Lombard or a Gilbert Melendez. So yeah,
Lombard for sure. Melendez at least had a period of time.
All right, yeah. Melendez at one point was easily one of the top lightweights in the world for sure.
He probably should have beat Benson Henderson in their title fight. I rewatched that recently, and yeah, Henderson got lucky on that decision.
And they gave him a rematch, and he got another shot at the title and got choked out. Gave him Ultimate Fighter. Gave him Eddie Alvarez. Had an awful fight with Eddie Alvarez. Hasn't won a fight since.
Yeah, that fight sucked. So again, I don't know what Cejudo's doing next. Again,
and you know what? Can we honestly say he mentally checked out? Maybe he just peaked.
Also very possible.
You know?
Also,
at that point, Melendez was a highly competitive lightweight, had fought some of the best in the world. Those fights take a toll.
You could make the same argument about Cejudo in terms of potentially looking at his peak.
Possible, but
dude's 33.
But Melendez doesn't have an Olympic gold medal.
So what? Most people don't.
He's the only Olympic gold medalist in UFC history to win a UFC championship. The only one. It's a
great accomplishment. And if there was
no one has done it before him.
And if there was an accomplishment clause built into his contract, I'm sure he would have been paid through the roof for it. You
don't want to praise Henry Cejudo. You hate him.
I'm happy to praise Henry Cejudo in a lot of ways. Again, phenomenal fighter. One of the more versatile combat sports athletes, but if he's
arguably one of the greatest of all time.
I don't think he rates greatest of all time combat sports.
He's a two-weight champion, defended his belts in both weight classes.
Okay, hold on. We're going to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. How long has his MMA career been?
Let's see. Just over 7 years.
Okay, less than 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
One title defense in one title defense in each weight class.
Yeah.
Very little. His Olympic gold medal. Unbelievable accomplishment. You know what happened the next Olympics? I'll tell you.
What?
He failed to make the national team to qualify for them, and he tried.
So
lack of sustained dominance over a prolonged period of time. If we're talking
you're talking about Olympics. You're not talking about MMA.
I'm talking about combat sports. That is a broad term.
Okay.
It encompasses fencing.
I'm talking about MMA. He's one of the best of all time.
Just MMA.
Just MMA.
He is not one of the top 10 best MMA fighters of all time.
Sure he is.
He is not.
Why not?
He has beaten some very good fighters. He's beaten some fighters on that list, but at a career that's less than 10 years.
Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz.
He went 1-1 with DJ.
Sure.
And to be fair, I do think he lost that second one.
All right. To be fair, it still went on his resume. He won the title.
It is. Highly competitive fight. Not going to take that away from him.
Demetrius Johnson defended the belt how many times?
11.
Was it 11?
I think so. Look, if you're talking about the 5 best combat sports MMA fighters, MMA fighters, right?
Yeah.
It's GSP, Silva, DJ Jones, Fedor.
If DJ's in that conversation, then Cejudo needs to be in that conversation.
I'm not saying he's not in the conversation. I'm saying
he moved up to a higher weight class and won the title.
Yeah.
Beat the champion of a higher weight class.
He didn't beat the champion. He won the title.
The champion of a higher weight class moved down. He knocked him out. Then he moved up and won a title in a higher weight class.
So are you really going to try and argue with me that like Ken Norton should be in the same discussion with Muhammad Ali then?
We're not talking about
no. That is the same argument you're making. So and so beat so and so who had a better career, so they should be in the discussion.
I don't know enough about Ken Norton to comment.
Okay. I'm just saying that is the argument you're making. I'm not saying Henry Cejudo's not great. I'm saying if we're talking about the history and legacy of how you compete in MMA, his brief tenure somewhat excludes him from the upper echelon.
He's done more in his brief tenure than some fighters will do in 10, 15 years.
I am aware of his level of accomplishment. I am not saying he is not somewhere on the list.
Yeah, he belongs in the top 10 for sure.
Top 10 don't easily. Think he rates top 10.
Yeah, he does.
I think the most difficult thing to do in MMA he has not done.
Which is what?
The most difficult thing to do in MMA is sustain success over a multiple year period of time. The most difficult thing to do is what GSP, Anderson Silva, and Demetrius Johnson did. That is the most difficult thing to do.
Okay.
To be champion.
All right. I'm not saying he's better. What he did is better, but I'm saying he deserves to be in that conversation.
Again, is he somewhere on that list if I were to actually go down and make a list of like the greatest MMA fighters ever?
Okay. So I don't, without ranking, I definitely have GSP, Anderson Silva, Daniel Cormier. Who else? Demetrius Johnson for sure.
Jones should be ahead of Cormier.
I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, sorry. No particular
order. So in no particular order. So here we go. GSP, Anderson Silva, Daniel Cormier, John Jones, Demetrius Johnson. So that's 5 right there.
Yep.
Okay, so are we allowed to put women on there as well?
Sure.
Amanda Nunes definitely belongs on there then, correct? I think you would agree.
I would agree with that, yes.
So that's 6.
If we're talking multiple level champions,
Stipe Miocic belongs on there. Yeah.
He wouldn't have come up next in my mind, but okay.
He's the first man to defend the heavyweight title.
I'm not saying he shouldn't have been there. I'm saying that's where my mind wouldn't have gone.
Okay.
I'd put BJ ahead of Cejudo. If we're talking career accomplishments. Again, we're talking about career accomplishments here, right? I think BJ rates ahead of Cejudo in that respect.
BJ Penn, I'll put him on. Yeah.
I mean, again, hung on too long.
Disregarding the latter half of his career. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 7 now. Matt Hughes.
I might put him above Hughes, but I'd also put Aldo above both of them.
Okay, so you want Jose Aldo on there.
I mean, look at his run through the WEC and into the UFC.
Henry Cejudo. So that's 10.
So you might have him at 10.
I have him in the 10.
You have him in the 10. Okay.
I don't really even like the whole pound for pound thing. Who are the greatest of all time? Like, who set themselves apart? This group easily did.
I have a few others that I would probably have again if we're talking about listing them. I have a few others I might
such as
again, talking career accomplishments. Let's see. I mentioned Aldo, Holloway, Khabib. Mentioned Anderson.
I'm not ready to put Khabib on there.
You're ready to put Cejudo on? With a fourth as much?
Yes.
Okay.
Khabib doesn't have 2 titles in 2 weight classes. So yeah.
No, he's just got the most valuable title and has defended it twice.
Look how he won it.
Yeah, less than ideal circumstances. Blame Tony Ferguson.
No.
That was supposed to be Ferguson's shot.
I won't.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, Conor didn't defend the title either.
Dude, Conor's not even ranking into my thought process.
Okay,
here.
good. Conor was the champion.
Conor was the featherweight champion. No, he was the lightweight champion.
He was the lightweight champion.
Yeah. Again, that was supposed to be Tony's shot. Then he blew out his knee 6 days out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, again, I would put
the
Khabib.
studio was too dark.
He was wearing sunglasses inside. You're asking for that. I say that as a guy who's been known to wear sunglasses inside on occasion.
That's victim blaming, Robert. Victim blaming.
Look, there's a degree of personal responsibility that has to come into this.
Oh,
hang on. So I'd put Khabib above him.
Probably put Israel Adesanya above him too.
No, not yet.
Joanna.
No.
No to Joanna.
No to Joanna.
Ronda.
Career achievements. Ronda versus Cejudo in just MMA. Cejudo beat better opposition, so probably not.
All right. Cyborg.
No. I think Amanda's the only woman you can put on this list right now.
Holly Holm.
I just said I think Amanda's the only woman you can put on this list right now.
Amanda's the only woman.
If we're talking just career MMA accomplishments.
All right. So I think some of these names.
Yeah, you know what, Max? I'd put Holloway on there.
Max Holloway, okay. Max Holloway, I think you can make an argument for. He had an incredible run.
Again, 12-fight unbeaten streak, featherweight champion, multiple defenses.
Aldo twice.
Yeah, beat Aldo twice. Again, 12 wins in a row, featherweight champion with title defenses, fought up for the interim belt at lightweight.
Frankie.
Again, Matt, I think Max rates above Henry at this point. If we're talking career accomplishments and longevity.
Okay. Sure. Fair. But look, in an opinion-based list, some of these names are arguable. Some of the points are arguable.
Yeah, until you hammer out specific empirical criteria. Again, that's one of the reasons. Look, there's only like 2 people.
Dominic Cruz. Maybe. No? Not consistent enough.
If we're talking about like career highs in MMA, I might say Cruz was better. But if we're talking career, again, like just total career, again, Cruz just had so many layoffs that I think it does impact how
Demetrius Johnson before Jimmy, beat in a title fight, beat Uriah Faber, multiple title fights.
Again,
TJ Dillashaw.
Given how that I consider sustained success over a prolonged period of time to be the most difficult thing to do in any combat sport, much less MMA, that's one of the reasons a lot of guys that have these great peaks but can't maintain it don't rate for me.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any MMA fighter, there's like maybe 5, who if you were to ask me to list the best combat sports athletes of all time would rank.
Okay, so by your criteria, I don't even think BJ Penn should be on your list. Because he didn't. Because outside of 2, what was it?
He had
3 title defenses.
He had 3 title defenses at lightweight, yeah.
It wasn't that sustained of a run because he had that break where he fought GSP.
Entirely possible. Again, if you still to this day ask me the most impressive stuff that's gone on in combat sports, I don't think MMA rates right now. If we're talking individual performances over prolonged periods of time.
Okay.
There's still nothing more impressive to me than Alexander Karelin run. Just nothing.
I still to win 2 belts in 2 weight classes in the UFC, and not only that, and defend them is pretty impressive.
It's incredibly difficult. I am not trying to take anything away from that.
Because it's rare for a fighter to just do it with 1 belt. All right.
Anyway,
so Kevin Randleman, can we move on?
Yeah, after that.
Kevin Randleman.
After that somewhat odd little detour we took there.
Kevin Randleman is joining the UFC Hall of Fame for the class of 2020, which is going to stream later this year on UFC Fight Pass. I don't know how they're handling International Fight Week. or if there even will
Neither
be
do
one.
they.
But Kevin Randleman, who was a two-time Division I NCAA champion, former UFC heavyweight champion, fought in Pride in UFC, is getting inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame this year.
Yeah, it's. I'm not
the pioneer era win.
Yeah, again, I think the UFC's criteria for this, because they don't actually have criteria for this.
I think it's solid criteria, honestly.
Hang on, he's a solid inclusion, all things considered, and I mean
I have the criteria for the pioneer era wing.
Okay.
Athletes who became pros before November 17th, 2007. 2000. So they're basing that on the date when the unified rules of MMA were adopted, at the minimum age of 35, or have been retired for 1 year or more. That's the criteria for pioneer.
Okay, so when I said that, that's unbelievably broad criteria, which is fine. It also means that you get inclusions that, if you look purely based on merit, are a little bit more
broad.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you get into, say, the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're anything other than a pitcher, they have you have to have specific percentages in each category, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they are off the top of my head. I'm not a huge baseball guy.
I don't know either,
but I know they exist. And
okay.
The UFC, again, they have some purposes of dividing between pioneer wing and more modern wing, which, okay, is fair enough. But other than that, they don't really have a criteria established in writing. They have kind of what they go by, which I'm not saying good, bad, or...
Except the criteria I just read for you.
Yeah, that's how you qualify to be included. That's not necessarily saying you must have achieved X to qualify for the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Your record has to be better than X. You have to have fought for a title X number of times. You have to have won a title X number of times. You have to have fought in the UFC X number of times.
That's not what criteria. That's not what criteria.
That is actually what criteria means for inclusion.
A principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided.
Yeah. So that's why I said the UFC's criteria for this is very low. And it allows them a lot of broad latitude with who they choose to include and exclude for whatever reason. And I mean, look, if you were to establish a win-based criteria, Randleman wouldn't qualify. His final record was what, 19-17?
Mm-hmm.
So you're a nearly 500 fighter.
Right.
And let me be clear, I'm not knocking Randleman. Dude fought at a time when it was the Wild West. And he won the heavyweight championship. I don't think he defended it, did he?
No, I don't think he did.
Because I know he won it after he lost that controversial decision to Boss Rutan. Then Rutan vacated because he wanted to move down to 205 and then retired due to injuries.
He won it from Pete Williams?
I think that's right.
Let's see. Yeah, he defended it once. So he did defend it.
Yeah, okay, he beat Pedro Hizzo.
Pedro Hizzo.
Pedro Hizzo, man. Yeah, then lost to Couture, lost to Liddell. Was released from the UFC shortly after. I mean, his most famous win is undoubtedly the knockout of Cro Cop when he was not supposed to win at all.
And then he lost a rematch.
Yeah, he is the only man that Mirko Cro Cop has submitted. He did it with a standing guillotine, if memory serves. And then the other thing everyone remembers about...
Incorrect.
What, Mirko choked somebody else out?
He's gotten other submission wins.
Which one? I know Josh Barnett tapped out due to injury. I think that's the only one.
Hyunman Myung and Shinichi Suzukawa. Hyunman Myung via arm triangle at Ryzen, And
When was
Shinichi,
this?
2016. And
Good for him.
Shinichi Suzukawa via armbar at Inoki Bombay in 2012.
Okay, so for
And
a
he
long
did fight
time.
again for the UFC after that.
Yeah, I didn't pay. Look, after Alistair Overeem kneed his testicles up into his abdomen, I kind of stopped paying attention to a lot of what Mirko did overseas. That's just kind of a sad fight to watch.
Oh,
if you're a
Pat
Mirko
Berry.
fan.
He choked out Pat.
Oh
Berry
yeah, he choked out Pat Berry.
in the Hug Fest.
Choking out Pat Berry. Yeah.
I
So
like
anyway,
Pat Berry.
I don't have anything against the guy. So yeah, then the other thing people remember about Randleman is that sick suplex he hit on Fedor, and then somehow still managed to lose the fight. Yeah, again, I don't really have a problem with him going in. Long history in the sport. The UFC heavyweight title at the time wasn't what it is now, in terms of the divisional strength and whatnot, but it's still an accomplishment.
He helped the UFC get to where they are now, and I think that counts for something.
Did he?
I think so.
I mean, he was there. He was there, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure the degree to which
my point is, guys like him helped forge and define the sport in that era.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys taking a big risk getting into the sport at all when it was what it was at the time.
And he had a legit athletic background too.
Yeah, he was an insane athlete. I don't know how much stock you want to put in what Phil Baroni has said about him. But Baroni was quoted as saying at one point in time that Randleman could literally, when he was getting into the cage, jump over it without touching it, instead of having to walk through the door if he wanted to. He had a very, very solid collegiate athletic amateur wrestling career. Freak athlete, roided to the gills, but then so were most people back then. He's an odd guy to kind of get your head around. I mean, he also had a drug-induced seizure backstage before a fight that caused it to be called off. But I don't really have a problem with him going in. The UFC's Hall of Fame is an odd thing. If you want to make an argument based on legitimacy, it doesn't. How much does it count as long as you're deliberately excluding Frank Shamrock? So
arguably it's not merit based, but
it's almost at this point. I don't think it's merit based. I mean, they have a fight wing. Hey, which fight did Dana White like the most? Sure, here's Guida versus Sanchez. Come on. Not saying that's a bad fight. But that here's Griffin Bonner 1. So we can continue the hagiography of that being the most important fight in UFC history.
Okay, Mr. Grumpy Pants.
Look, I'm going to get grumpy about the Bruce Lee 30 for 30 because the continued hagiography of Bruce Lee annoys me. Look, Bruce Lee's an unbelievably important... Hang on. Bruce Lee, incredibly important figure in the world of martial arts, right? Not 100%.
Yeah.
He called out elements of the culture when they needed to be called out. He worked very hard, developed a very important style. Guy who listens to the show, I know, Andrew Graham, who's been on once or twice, trains in JKD.
Helped invent mixed martial arts.
That's bull. And that's where one of the things that I draw the line at. Like, everyone because Dana White thinks Bruce Lee is cool, yeah, he totally helped invent MMA. No. The fact that at a time when martial arts systems were unbelievably rigid, he said, hey, by the way, this is a bad idea. Everyone has something to offer does not mean he foresaw in some prophetic vision that mixed martial arts will exist.
What about his contest with Gene LaBelle, which was like the precursor to MMA?
That, again, how much was some of that's gone down in urban legend. It's somewhat more mythologized. I know, hang on.
It's documented.
It is more mythologized than it should be.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, and look, that event is one of the things that I think points out the importance of Bruce Lee's mindset at the time. He didn't get unbelievably upset or embarrassed. He went, oh, you have something that I don't. maybe I should look into incorporating this. And if Bruce Lee had not died so young, maybe he was still working on his game. He was still improving. Who knows where he would have gone if he hadn't died so young. But again, there's a lot of, hagiography or sainthood that gets conferred upon him. And he was important. No one with half a brain will deny that. He was important within the culture of martial arts. He was important for drawing interest to martial arts. So again, very, very important. Very talented.
Enter the Dragon, I think, is a brilliant movie.
It's been way too long since I've seen it to comment on the quality of the filmmaking. But there's a lot of just, Saint Bruce Lee that gets kind of thrown around that annoys me because he was not that. He was not perfect. The system he left when he died was not the end all be all of martial arts. There are people who believe that.
I think if we're he was a human being. No one seems to talk about. I get the sense the woman he was with the night he died was that his mistress or what?
I don't know. There's a lot about Bruce Lee that no one talks about. His steroid use.
Was he using steroids?
Oh yeah. He was a big believer in trying to perfect the body, and chemically enhancing elements of it gets you closer to perfection. They just do. There's some argument that part of what contributed to his death was that he had some sweat glands removed from under his arms. Because he thought it hit.
That I never heard about.
Again, is
that real? Is that true though?
I believe so. Okay. Again, there's a lot. There's a lot about Bruce that is falls into myth because for a long time, no one wanted or was willing to really, take a look at both the highs and the lows. So everything gets kind of grayed. We don't get a real look. And it's one of those things that, annoys me as a martial artist that there's that giant I shouldn't say giant, but there's a segment of the martial arts community that think martial arts was, peaked with Bruce Lee when he died in the 70s. I'm sorry. No. So anyway, point being, I don't have a problem getting grumpy at sacred cows on occasion. All right. I think the last thing I wanted to touch on briefly, news broke and there was a health scare in the Nurmagomedov family this last week or so. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, Khabib's father, went into a coma. Last report I saw was that he was in a coma after suffering a heart attack that was brought on by complications from the COVID virus. Now, again, that's kind of just what I've seen. Thankfully, last I heard, Abdulmanap was out of his coma, looking to recover. I wish him a speedy recovery. If you don't know how important Abdulmanap is to the presence of the martial tradition in Dagestan, he is like the godfather of MMA.
According to Yahoo Sports, he tested negative for COVID-19.
Okay, then
so he did not have COVID-19.
Okay, that was erroneously reported then, so my mistake. Happy to own up to that one being wrong. Yeah, he's an unbelievably important figure in that part of the world for just providing the youth with an alternative to extremism. I don't know how many of you know too much about Dagestan as a part of the world. It's been war-torn forever, basically. And it's a hotbed of extremism, a lot of it Islamic in nature. And Abdulmanap went out of his way to try and steer the youth of that country into athletics, into sambo, into other martial arts. And he had a successful career himself as either as a sambo practitioner or wrestler. Forgive me, it's been a while since I've looked at the material on that. But he is an incredibly important person to that part of the world. And it's better for him being there on a fairly large scale. So hope he recovers. So that's kind of all I had to say on that. If you've got anything to add to that, Jeff.
Best wishes to Habib's father and his family. Hope he can recover. Last I heard, he's in stable but serious condition. That was 3 days ago. I don't know if there's been. Has there been a later update?
I think that's the most recent one, was him being out of the coma at least, and then still.
Okay, so he was, yeah. So he's not out of the woods, but I hope he will be okay. So best wishes to him, Abdulmanap and his family.
Okay, let me check Twitter one last time, see if anything crazy happened over the last little bit while we've been doing this.
I had my doubts about UFC running events, but
yeah, okay, hang on. Sorry, that's the other thing I want. That's one of the things I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me of that. So, we've had 3 events, and I didn't get a chance to go into this with anyone.
Okay.
Because I did the UFC 249 review solo. Fanless events, just as a consumer of them so far, what do you think? Yay, nay?
I think it works better for UFC than it does for pro wrestling. The way the UFC handled
that. For the record, my stance on that is that given that professional wrestling is a performance, and I don't mean that negatively, it's a performance that relies on the live crowd as part of the performance, right? It engages the present audience in what's going on. And I think that is a necessary component for it, unless you're really, really good about how you tweak your presentation.
I mean, AEW has done some decent tweaks, but it's still, to me, it's still lacking. UFC, the way they produce these shows where it's just centered on the octagon, I kind of forgot that there weren't even any fans there, to be frank. Now, to me, most of the fights were good. I didn't hate it, to be frank. Now, just things being where they are with this pandemic, as long as they're doing all these tests and I feel like they're taking the proper safety measures, I'm okay with them continuing like this for a while.
Someone leaked, I think, the UFC's safety protocols over the last week or so.
Yeah.
And, they're not bad. Sadly, the UFC isn't actually adhering to them a lot of the time.
Well, I mean, WWE and AEW technically aren't either.
They don't even have safety protocols. Like, okay. WWE isn't testing anyone, right?
Supposedly they're taking temperatures.
I mean, which is not nothing, but you are contagious well before you have a fever.
Okay. We know, I'm not saying it's a perfect situation, and I think there were valid questions around the Jacare thing, for example, and why he was allowed. I imagine he went to the weigh-in so he could still get his show money, probably.
He was not guaranteed that at all, even after weighing in.
I don't know what it sounds questionable that he was allowed to go to the weigh-ins, even though he was wearing gloves and a mask and was kept further away. It seems grossly negligent that was allowed.
I would agree with that.
But look, and second of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical expert. Okay. But Anthony Fauci has said, you can run pro sports in empty arenas, and it seems like they've taken a lot of necessary steps. Now, I haven't read the safety protocols, but I feel like these events were not a disaster, and they kept not yet, but I mean, look, they kept the amount of people there limited. No, they were closed to the general public. The announcers were socially distanced,
unless they were on camera.
Okay, yeah, but like, just for example, if movie and TV productions start again, Robert, when they're going to be doing some I'm sure there are going to be parts in movies and TV productions where you can shoot around the fact that you're not next to each other, but there are going to be parts where people aren't socially distanced, and I think you would
I'm
agree
aware.
to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's inevitable. It's inevitable, you know. When I go into the grocery store, there are people who are not socially distancing from me. You know, I don't see why that's
me too.
And I don't see why that's okay, other than the fact that governments say these grocery stores are essential businesses. So
because they are.
Okay.
I mean, in all seriousness, there's always been.
I don't know why that. Why does to me that doesn't make it okay though.
Look, again, do I wish people would adhere to the appropriate protocols? Yeah, but if you want to see society crumble very quickly, tell people they can't go buy food. So I will put up with the risk. Now, again, do I wish people would follow the procedures? Yeah, and look, you live in a much more densely populated part of the country than I do. You live in a part of the country that has a much higher, I think you've had a lot more cases than we have. I'm at significantly less risk than you, just from a purely practical standpoint as far as that goes.
Yeah, I will say, I don't think Dana White went about this the right way. I think the fact that he was so confrontational about it probably didn't help.
Ugh. Yeah, tell me about it. Dana's decision that the media is out to get him over the last few weeks was...
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about he was... I feel like he was so... I don't know. I feel like he had a bit of a complex about this, that he had to do this,
Yeah.
I
think that's very fair.
But my point is, I could have gotten on board with it more if he was just not so Dana White about it, Yeah,
he was unbelievably confrontational and unbelievably... I think he also developed a bit of a persecution complex for this. Like, the build-up to 249 and these two events, he's had a little bit of the everyone was out to get me syndrome. Which is...
the Indian reservation thing.
Oh, God, what a bad idea that... all we did... And look, I have, zero influence, right? I got this show and I got my coverage and whatever poor souls follow me on Twitter. Right? I am not a major player in the MMA media culture space, right? I'm just not. I said, I think this is a bad idea because I thought it was a bad idea.
I agree. That was a bad idea.
Yeah, that doesn't mean I don't want fights to resume safely. It doesn't mean I don't want fighters to get paid. It means at that moment in time, the course of action they were taking struck me as unbelievably reckless and detrimental to all parties concerned. That doesn't mean I want the UFC to fold. If the UFC goes away, guess what I don't get to do? This. People in MMA media lost their jobs because there was that big, because of the state of the world. The fact that they're also saying, it's probably not responsible to hold fights right now under these conditions should not be taken as an indicator that they're trying to screw you. They're screwing themselves. It was handled poorly by Dana, but Dana handles everything the way he handles everything. That man and Tact are
but
polar opposites.
Once they got these things running, I think, aside from some errors and gaps, I think they did fairly okay. I think they did a lot. I feel like they did more than what WWE has done.
They have. I think empirically they have. Part of the reality is we're not going to know for sure until...
All right. The next couple weeks.
Yeah, there's fallout. We have to wait for the fallout, We've had the events. Jacare bounced around a lot of people. There was plenty of video of him circulating. He and Verdum were hugging.
Did he actually hug Verdum? Did he actually touch Verdum?
Arm around the shoulder kind of thing? Yeah, they were. It was on Verdum's
fist bumped
Instagram.
Dana.
Yeah, I mean, he was a rat. Like, there were plenty of people who mentioned that they saw him out and about during that fight week. Yeah, the video was on Verdum's Instagram. I don't know if he took it down.
I have the video right now. I'm gonna watch it.
They're right next to each other. Like, I don't know if
they don't. Okay, no, they never touch. There's no arm. There's no contact.
He's really close. He's close enough that.
Yeah, but that could be the camera angle.
Let me put it this way: if he is that close, the mask is not helping.
Okay, possibly.
To the extent that the masks help at all, which is still somewhat disputed science.
Here's my point. There was no physical contact in the video. There was no arm around the shoulder. And this is the only... You said there's lots of footage. This is the only video I can find.
Okay, okay, let me rephrase. What I meant to say was that video was circulated a lot.
That said, it doesn't look good, along with his interaction with Dana White at the weigh-ins, where they did a fist bump, gloves or not.
Yeah, and I mean, he and his cornermen were, I think a few media members have mentioned that other people reached out to them.
Two of his cornermen also tested positive.
Yeah. So we'll have to see, because if 249 winds up being, a nexus point for the spread of the virus, we're going to have to revisit how things are done. But again, that's...
The government regulated this event too, so they were on board.
The government sanctioned it, and there is culpability there as well. So it's not entirely on the UFC, which is an important thing.
In the Association of Ringside Physicians, who decried the Indian reservation event, or the Native American reservation at Tashi Palace.
They didn't just decry that. At that point in time, they said no combat sports can safely be held right now. Yeah. And then a few weeks later, when information changed and protocols were developed, they said, okay, they revised their guidelines as the situation evolved.
That time to me was not the right time to do it. This time might not even be, this might not even be the right time either. But I feel like some steps were taken, and I feel like the fact is that WWE and AEW are still allowed to continue running events, and they're putting on events. They're being allowed to do that, and they are not doing it and they are not taking as many safety protocols as the UFC is.
That is correct.
So, and there is a very high likelihood, Robert, that other pro sports are going to be running in the coming months when there's very likely, I don't think there's ever going to be an actual cure working vaccine for this virus.
There might be, but vaccines don't develop instantly.
And now we have plenty of crazy people who are saying they're not going to take the vaccine. So,
well, in fairness to them, the language used by some of the people involved with that, with those press releases, was poor.
Okay. I think a lot of the language used by the World Health Organization was poor.
I would agree with that too.
Okay. This virus it's not going away. It's not going away anytime soon. So.
Well, no, I mean, look, NASCAR came back today, didn't it?
What was that?
Yeah, I think there was a NASCAR race today.
Yeah.
But again, no crowd.
If I'm trying to make a point here, my point is we're going to have to figure out ways to deal with this in some way. And I support the idea of coming up with solutions. I just think Dana White did not always voice it or act on it in the best fashion.
He absolutely didn't. And I think you're correct. Look, there's going to come a point when someone's going to have to... I need a good... I've heard a few, metaphors for this in different movies and whatnot, and I haven't found one that I really like. But someone's going to have to, be the first person to eat the oyster,
I think that's a good way to put it.
Where did I steal that from? Daylight. Sylvester Stallone movie. Yeah,
good movie, underrated movie.
As far as disaster flicks go, yeah. Someone's going to have to take that shot, do everything that they possibly can to be responsible while doing an irresponsible thing, and see how it plays out. And the UFC seems to have been okay being the first person to put all of the fighters at serious risk, which shouldn't surprise anyone. But again, someone was going to have to take the plunge, you know? So there's still a lot of, information that's going to have to come out in the weeks that follow the events. But thus far, the UFC, again, I think they were as responsible as they could be while doing something fundamentally irresponsible. And we'll have to see how things play out. Again, if there's a big outbreak that is traced to this event.
All that said, no fighter who wants to sit this out should be punished or shamed for doing so. One specifically, Aljamain Sterling.
You know how crappy the portions of the MMA fan base are? I absolutely mean this. There was a segment of the fan base that was saying Rose Namajunas should produce the death certificate of her aunt.
That's disgusting.
I completely agree, but
who were people on Twitter saying that, or?
Yeah. Look,
remember,
they wanted some form of empirical proof that she wasn't sucking Jessica Andrade. I don't know.
That makes me sick.
Again,
Amanda Nunes is not keen to fight right now either.
Yeah, there's a reason she pushed off until 250. And I would guarantee this about Nunes. If something happens between now and then that reveals a giant fault in the protocols or some big outbreak is traced to a UFC event, she'll probably go nope. And I don't blame her one bit.
Same thing. And Stipe.
Yeah, Stipe's working. Stipe's... His big thing was, this is one of the other, you mentioned Chael doesn't get too fired up recently. He got pretty fired up when Stipe released his thing. He said, because Stipe's whole thing was, the governor of Ohio still has our state shut down. I'm happy to fight Cormier. I'm happy to fight him for the amount of money we discussed. But I'd like to have a gym that's open so I can train.
And what did Chael say?
Well, Chael was just on his back. Like, Chael was in agreement with him. Like, just any talk of stripping Stipe is ridiculous. He's willing to fight. He's willing to fight for the money discussed. He's just got a duty as a first responder. So again, just one of the other things that came out.
People are definitely advocating him to get stripped now, and
sure they are.
Daniel and Cormier's he's been party to that as well, which I don't really think is right. So no fighters who want to sit out right now should be allowed to do that without punishment or penalty. And that goes for fans should not be shaming them for wanting to do so.
No, look, anybody giving fighters grief right now over choosing the health and safety of their family and their loved ones over your entertainment, come on, guys. Yet no one should be given. I'm not going to give anyone any grief over them choosing to sit out.
And it's like the fans giving Martha Hart grief because she doesn't want Owen to be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Did you hear her episode of Talk is Jericho?
I can't comment on this.
Okay.
I can't say anything else. But yes, I'm aware of it.
Yeah. The story about the WWE suing her after she countersuing her when she sued them for breach of Owen's contract. I mean, really, guys? Gross. And I don't blame her one bit, to be quite honest. After the way that was handled, I don't blame her one bit for giving Vince McMahon and that company the finger like that. Not at all.
It just I get that fans believe Owen deserves to be honored or whatever. I understand that, but I mean, come on. Think about it. Think about it just for 1 second. This woman's husband died
due to darn near criminal negligence on the part of WWE.
Yes.
Everything that happened was entirely preventable.
And look, I'm not a lawyer, but there's very good documentation that's existing, that's out there that you can search for on Google, through Google, that supports this. Because there was a lawsuit, and a lawsuit that was settled. So,
Yeah.
just saying.
His episode of The Dark Side of the Ring is coming up, right?
It is the season finale next week. And
Okay.
I can't really, for various reasons, I can't say much more. But you will, well, we'll find out.
I just knew it was coming up. I wasn't sure what day it was.
But yeah, that's what that reminds me of. Fans are selfish, basically.
For as much as we like to think otherwise. Okay, I think that's going to wrap us up here. Yeah, nothing else crazy is broken. For the record, me personally, I kind of dig the fanless events. I think a live crowd is an irreplaceable component to a great fight. But I've also sat through so many awful crowds that, you know what? I'm okay with there not being an audience at all. Maybe I'll feel differently. And again, don't get me wrong. If something like, if the fight between, imagine a good crowd reacting to, Gaethje versus Ferguson, it would have been rocking.
Yeah, I agree. But
I also don't need a bunch of guys booing and wooing during Gadelia and Hill. Yeah, fights, okay.
Or booing when a fight goes to the ground, or when they're working on the ground, etc.
I just don't, and I don't need the woos. I hate the woos so much.
I like the woos when they're appropriate.
I don't mind them in professional wrestling, right? It's got context there.
Okay.
You do a Ric Flair spot, you do the crowd woos, because again, it's a Ric Flair spot, right? Like, okay. I don't know why it permeated MMA to just at some random point, some drunk guy up in the third floor, up in the third balcony, just goes woo, and then it just spreads like a wildfire.
Ric Flair and alcohol.
I can blame booze more than Rick in this case. Like the woo, as far as Ric Flair, has been around long before MMA was even a thing. But for it to perpetuate itself in MMA like it is, it's a bunch of drunken idiots, I guess. I don't know. Okay, so you've kind of hinted you've got some stuff in the works. It's been a few weeks. I know movie reviews aren't really a thing at the moment, although this Tuesday.
Movie?
This Tuesday, actually, Mark, there will be a Damn You Hollywood. We're going to be reviewing Scoob.
How was Scoob?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to wait for Tuesday. I'm putting it off.
Okay. I did get an interview with Tom Kenny, who's the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants. He's doing a very nice project right now about COVID-19 called A Moment for Kids, which is producing PSAs for children to tell them about to educate them about COVID-19 using cartoon characters. And we did talk about the SpongeBob movie and one of my favorite shows, Final Space, which he also works on. I can't say much, but you are going to want to tune in to the Wrestling Zone tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific, for two somethings that are very special for me, very big for me. But I can't go into detail on what they are.
No, I will certainly be looking forward to that. Let's see. As for myself, again, there's a Scoob review this coming Tuesday on Damn You Hollywood. I got outvoted on that.
And yeah, Castlevania Season 3 sucked hard.
Yep. Mark and I, we buried that pretty good on a TV party. So if you're...
The problem is Warren Ellis. He's outlived his usefulness.
Is he the showrunner?
He's the writer.
Okay.
He's the writer for all 3 seasons. a whole season where nothing happens.
Not really.
Nothing happens. And the heroes are absolute idiots.
Well, the heroes
the
are
villains
idiots.
the villains are also idiots.
Yeah, Castlevania Season 3 is a bunch of dumb people doing dumb things. In predictably dumb fashion. Over a protracted period of time, much more so than it needs to be. So yeah. Anyway, you can listen to Mark and I on a TV party over on the Randleman Broadcasting Network, on the W2M network as well, just kind of where the Randleman Broadcasting Group has its own subheading under the W2M network. So find us over there. Again, Scoob review on Tuesday. Again, you can read my full reports for the last two events, the UFC on ESPN Plus 29 and UFC on ESPN 8 in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. And we'll be back here next week to preview the next event. Again, there is no event on the 23rd, but there is supposed to be one on the 30th. Hopefully we'll have a full fight card by then. And a venue. So we'll give you an update next week, if nothing else. If it winds up getting canceled, we'll be here to touch briefly on that as well. I will say about that, Woodley and Burns, not a bad main event for a fight night.
Wouldn't you rather have Colby versus Woodley?
Yeah, but they're not going to do that on a fight night. That's a pay-per-view fight.
Just call it UFC 176 and make it a pay-per-view.
There already was a UFC 176. You might be able to get that for a straight ESPN card. Headline it with those, with those two. But I mean, yeah. Look, I'd rather see that, sure. But
what was UFC 176?
Oh, I want to say that was a GSP.
That
fight.
Was the canceled Aldo versus Mendez.
Oh yeah.
So call it UFC 176. Make it a pay-per-view.
I thought you were saying that because it's Fight Night 176.
No, call it UFC 176, the pay-per-view.
Yeah, they won't.
They should.
Nah, they're not gonna. So, anyway, we'll have an update on that card next week, if nothing else, and all the other news and combat sports-related content that you all come to this show for. So, hope to see you back then. Jeff, always nice to talk to you. Glad we could finally connect and get you back on the show.
Welcome back, Jeffrey.
I'm not going to sing a theme song for you. I'm just not. So I spend too much time with Mark because that's the kind of thing Mark would do. He would break into a rendition of the Welcome Back Kotter theme or something like that for you. Sorry, not that guy. But I am very glad that you're back. I've missed talking to you, and I got really sick of talking to myself. So
likewise, Robert. Thank you.
All right. Until next week, everybody. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.